You asked who owns the Fed earlier. The rumors are there are about 30 families on Earth that are the ultimate beneficial owners of all the stock and all the central banks in the world, with the exception of the non-Western central banks, let's call them, which are in countries like Iran. And I'll let you read between the lines on that one. Those 30 families are said to own over 50% of the world's wealth, 8.5 billion people. Half of that wealth is in the hands of a few thousand. The U.S. government has beside it a non-governmental organization called the Federal Reserve. It's a privately owned institution. It is legally authorized to counterfeit currency. So if you counterfeit or fabricate a $100 bill, we go to jail for that. That is the exact same activity that the Federal Reserve engages in by the trillion. There is absolutely zero economic distinction between the Federal Reserve money printing or quantitative easing or any of these other euphemisms that it loves to decorate itself with. There's no economic distinction between those activities and counterfeiting. The central bank exists beside the US government. So the Federal Reserve is issuing shitcoin called USD. They have the sole privilege to print USD. US government has the sole privilege to print shitcoin called US Treasury, UST. The US government can print as many bonds as it wants to borrow USD from the Fed. Literally, there's no ceiling, there's no supply cap, and they use that
Robert Breedlove, it's great to see you.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me.
First of all, you have a great name, Breedlove.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
That was my mother's a birthday gift, my first birthday that my mother got for me. It's her last name. So I'm very grateful to have it. Although I was made fun of quite a bit as a kid for it.
Does it have anything to do with breeding and loving?
Neither, actually.
Okay.
It's derived from this Scottish clan. It means wolf hunter or wolf trapper. So apparently we were hunting or trapping wolves at some point in my lineage.
So nearly the opposite of breed and love.
Yeah, maybe. Well, maybe hunting wolves is a way to love your family. I don't know. If you're protecting them.
Well, words are funny like that. You know, you get things like awful. It used to mean you're full of awe, and now it's connected to being bad. Or some of the most beautiful words.
Humiliation is the same way.
Yeah.
It's, now we think it's like embarrassment. But it used to just be the process of acquiring humility.
There you go.
Oh.
It's funny, some of the most beautiful words I can think of, when you talk to people in other countries, you say, what's the most beautiful English word? And they'll say something like diarrhea. It's funny.
I've never heard that.
Or alopecia or something. You know, these beautiful words often mean things that aren't quite so beautiful.
I think it's in the movie Donnie Darko where I got this, but they say the most phonetic phrase in the English language is cellar door.
What does that mean, phonetic?
Well, phonetic just sounds beautiful.
Cellar door.
So yeah, I guess verbally aesthetic, or sonically aesthetic. It sounds beautiful. And it does, actually. I found myself cellar door.
Cellar door.
It's pretty beautiful.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Tolkien. And I marvel at all the names that he came up with, like Galadriel, Gandalf, Gondor. And I'm like, there's something to like certain letters evoke like M's and R's and S's kind of make us feel uneasy, like murder, Slytherin, Sauron. And then these G's and D's like Gondor sound honorable, God.
Interesting.
I don't know. There's something to like the harmonics of it that lifts you up.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know much about this topic, but I have found the word Christ to be very powerful. Something about it just, I don't know what I'm writing a book and we're talking a lot about the nature of words. And one of the things, it's all metaphorical ultimately. So we describe words as like containers for concepts, or that even concepts themselves don't really exist until we crystallize it into a word. And then the word itself is really just a point of shared agreement. Like we all agree that this thing has a certain meaning so that we can converse. But there does seem to be this sonic quality to the words, like almost the vibrational imprint of the word itself has some, super linguistic utility, if that makes any sense, right? There's something to the word in the way it sounds, in the way it's written, that can influence us in a way other than its conceptual contents. And I don't know much about it, but it's, if there's certain words that are just like that.
Well, words have magic. That's why we call it spelling.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
It's funny how most words will have like a double meaning. Like when you get up in the morning, you say good morning, but morning is a sad thing. And
interesting.
We try to get through the week, and weakness is not good. And when we get to the weekend, we're weakened. All these words that we use in just common everyday speak kind of are like casting spells on us a little bit, I feel.
Interesting. Yeah, I want to learn more about it for sure.
Anyways, before we go too deep, I wanted to connect with you today because I feel like we have a lot in common. And it seems like you've taken many of my interests a few steps farther than I've taken them. There's 5 basic pillars of life that I look at. There's the financial, health, social, mental, and time. There's many more, but those are kind of the 5 main ones. And I would love to kind of first jump through some of those pillars and just get maybe your 2 cents and some of the hacks and some of your philosophies towards those. And so when I look up your name, you are synonymous in the finance world, big time, especially with Bitcoin. So I was wondering if we could maybe just dive into the finance pillar first, which is something I don't cover too often on my channels, but I think you've done a great job of bridging philosophy with finance.
Thank you so much. I want to write down the 5 pillars just so I have them in front of me. You said financial, time.
Financial, health, social, mental, and time.
Okay, got it.
It's actually from a good book by, I'll throw it up on the screen. It's called The 5 Pillars of Wealth. Okay. 5 Types of Wealth by Sahil Bloom.
Oh, Sahil. Yes, I know Sahil.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very useful framing. And I'll start with, I guess, the financial. So it's funny when people ask me what is the name of your podcast? Once I know you have a podcast, I say the What is Money Show. And the first thing they typically say if they haven't listened to it is they're like, oh, it's a finance podcast. And funny enough, we talk about everything on the show, almost everything. It's very, very wide ranging in our topics. But finance per se is one of the things we talk about least, unless you understand, we talk about the nature of money a lot, but we're not talking necessarily about what people, when I went to college, I got a degree in accounting and finance, and the finance that we studied in college is not what we talk about on the show, right? These are discounted cash flow models and the weighted average cost of capital and all of these decisions that executives use to kind of guide their businesses, make investment decisions, allocate capital, et cetera, et cetera. We talk about that very little on the show. But if you understand finance as more, I guess more specifically, we talk a lot about money or monetary history and monetary ontology, if you will, or the nature of money, if you want to say it less esoterically. And I found that to be, and a lot of people have, joined us for the ride, have found that to be a very useful study. And so, why is that? Well, first of all, obviously money is a very significant influence in our lives, right? It largely determines the degrees of freedom you have, largely determines where you are in the socioeconomic hierarchy, right? Which has a big influence on your social status, which has a big influence on your ability to reproduce. So it becomes very Darwinian very quickly, right? And so and we go through many definitions of money on the show, but one that's very simple yet useful is that money is the thing we use to acquire goods. And people typically say goods and services, but I'm just going to compress it to goods because services are just intangible goods, basically. It's still a good being just what solves a problem, right? It's a solution to a problem. So money is the language or the instrument or the medium we use to acquire goods. And so goods being solutions to problems are very closely related to just basic survivability, right? And anyone that's been alive as an adult for more than a day probably knows, the amount of purchasing power you have, which typically people think of as like amount of dollars in their bank account, directly corresponds to your livelihood, right? Your survivability in the world. Another good definition of money is that it is just the instrument that offers you the widest range of options in the marketplace. So any solution that can be brought to bear on any problem, money is a means to obtaining that, right? Basically, people will sell you anything, any good, any service that they have for money. That's another definition of money. So as you deal with the world, which is to move forward in time, we're always facing the horizon of uncertainty, right? Tomorrow is not promised. Life is short. There's a lot of different aphorisms that capture this, but there's always uncertainty around the corner. We never know what's going to happen. And so what is the optimal strategy for dealing with uncertain conditions? And the answer is optionality, which a less fancy way of saying is just a wide set of options, right? It's because you don't know what's going to happen. If I don't know what's going to happen, then the more options I have at my disposal, the more adequately I can respond to different situations as they present themselves. And so money is a representation of those options, right? And that it can be, and to use a finance term, it's like a call option, right? That you have a right to exercise this option on any good in the marketplace that any market actor can bear. And so with that comes great power, right? Great survivability. So that's maybe a couple of answers on the financial pillar, but I'll pause there and see where you want to take it.
Yeah, that was well explained. I don't have like a high level financial vocabulary, so I appreciate you explaining it to me like I'm a fifth grader. I might need it on a kindergarten level.
Well, that's how I come to understand it myself, so you're more than welcome.
Yeah, and it sounds like, I liked what you said about opening optionality, where it's kind of like if you have problems and those problems require money to fix them and you have the money, then you don't have problems.
Well, we must be careful. Of course, there are many problems money cannot solve, right? Naval's famously said that, what do you say, a fit body, a household full of love, and a quiet mind. Maybe it's a peaceful mind. He said 3 things money can never buy. A fit body, household full of love, and a quiet or peaceful mind. I think he said. I could be wrong about the third one. So as potent of a problem solver as money is, it does not solve all problems. And any person that is, terminally ill, for instance, would often trade any amount of money that they have for just a few more days in the world. So although it is, I think, the most powerful material incentive that we have as civilians, and by civilians, I mean participants in civilization, it's not everything, right? It's not, there are deeper things like life itself, spiritual pursuits, virtue. If you're acquiring money unethically, for instance, stealing or coercing or killing, as many people have in the past and many people do today, many criminal organizations, including the state, all specialize in acquiring money in that way. I don't think it serves. You can, well, what does Christ say? What does it profit a man to gain the whole world should he sell his soul? Right? You don't, even if you get to that position of financial supremacy, you're a multi-billionaire. I think if you acquired it the wrong way, you're not going to feel good. You're not going to be living a peaceful life. You're not going to have fulfillment. You're going to have the opposite. You're going to be looking over your shoulder. You're going to be leading a very suboptimal life.
I love that quote you just mentioned from Matthew. Mm-hmm. And the following quote is, what would you exchange in order to gain your soul back?
Mm-hmm.
And it, that puts it into perspective.
Yes.
There's no price somebody would pay, or there should be no price. But I was reading the comments. I just posted that on my Instagram, that quote. What's the quote? Sorry, let me grab it.
Yeah.
Let me grab it up real quick. It's from Mark 8:36. For what shall it profit a man to gain the whole world, yet lose his own soul?
Mm. You just posted that.
I just posted that.
Wow. I did not creep on your profile before this. So
like 3 days ago.
That's an interesting synchronicity.
And it was funny because there was a few comments of people that said, oh, I would do it. I have a price to sell my soul. And I responded to the guy. I said, the funny thing is you're probably selling your soul and you're getting nothing in return.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people sell themselves out for nothing. It's a famous Dostoevsky quote.
Yes.
Your worst sin is you have destroyed and betrayed yourself for nothing.
Yes. Yeah, there's another, dude, I love all of these quotes that are filled with monetary metaphors. I think this is another area money is very interesting to me in that it gives us many conceptual metaphors that help us understand domains that are non-monetary, right? We're citing one here. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world should he lose his soul? Right? The very concept of profit itself is a monetary. We gain awareness of the concept of profit through an embodied experience of exchanging and dealing, right? We know what a profit is, we know what a loss is through money, basically. There's another one that comes to mind. Many a man thinks he is buying pleasure when in fact he is selling himself to it.
Benjamin Franklin.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's from Benjamin Franklin. I just posted that one too.
Amazing.
That's crazy. We're on the same wavelength.
Really amazing. Man, he has a lot of good ones, Ben Franklin. Not to get off track, but my favorite one of his, I think this was him. I stopped attributing quotes because I have messed up the attribution so many times that I just gave up. So I'll often say a wise man once said, but I think this was Benjamin Franklin, said, rebellion to tyranny is obedience to God.
Yeah, it was definitely a forefather.
Yeah.
Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin for sure.
Yeah, it was on one of their family seals. And so yeah, there's this, if you acquire economic gain or economic advantage, but you're doing it through acts that are, vicious or non-virtuous or unethical, still, basically stealing, harming or coercing or killing, right? If you're doing any of those things, then although you might, you'll enjoy some short-term gain, certainly, right? Like if you're successful, right? You successfully steal whatever amount of money it is or whatever the goods are, great. You've increased your survivability in the short term. But what you've done when you zoom out, and I think this becomes, I think people, well, I don't know. I was going to say when people become parents, they tend to see the bigger picture a little more because you actually have a child and you see that they're a reflection of you, the good, bad, and the ugly, everything that you're bringing to the table, so to speak, they mirror it back to you. And so it kind of is a reality check for you when you see certain behaviors in your child that you would not condone, but then you realize, oh my goodness, they got that from me, right? Or where they got it. And so when you zoom out a bit and you realize that acquiring resources or money unethically, what you're actually doing is you're pulling at the thread that binds civilization. Again, civilization being, let's just say, the process by which we interact with one another consensually, right? We interact with one another within the limiting principles of life, liberty, and property, right? So we don't coerce one another or harm one another. We don't kill one another, and we don't steal from one another, right? These are kind of like the socially encoded biblical ethics on which the West is built. When you violate those things, right, you're pulling at that thread, right? And this gets a little bit deeper into how a lot of human interaction is imitative. So if I go into the world and I make a bunch of money stealing from people and I become this rich guy, mafioso or statesman or whatever it is, well, you're communicating to the next generation through your actions that is the right path to take, right? Because everyone prefers abundance to poverty. And so they see you, mafioso or statesman, at the top of the hierarchy, and you got there through stealing. Well, then you're sending a pretty strong signal to the next generation that those are the patterns of action they should engage in to acquire wealth. And so then you have to ask yourself, okay, well, if you're a parent, do you want your child or their children living in a world where everyone's pulled at that thread and the whole thing comes unraveled and we're all just living in some kind of animalistic, fight to the death over every sandwich kind of environment? Or do you want to live in a world where people follow rules, right? Consensually adopted rules, that we have ethics, that there's a reasonable expectation you can go into the world and conduct yourself peacefully and productively and not have to face the threat of murder over every sandwich, And so when you start zooming out and thinking more long-term about your actions, I think you'll quickly see that the unethical path of wealth acquisition is no good.
Well said. And it seems like we are seeing too many threads being pulled, because we're at this point where you're talking about the younger generation. When I talk to younger kids, it seems like the idea of saving for retirement is just not even on the table.
Sure.
What's the point? Civilization's not even going to be here in 50 years. And then they look up and they see all these scammers and grifters and politicians that do insider trading. All these people who have taken advantage and kind of cut corners seem to have gotten ahead.
Yes.
And it can lead to extreme cynicism.
Yes.
I don't know. Is there a path to reverse course here?
I think it's first useful to bring up the concept of time preference. And again, I'll try to this is an economics term. It's mostly used in what's typically called Austrian economics, but which is in fact economic science itself. The economics that's taught at university is not economic science. It's a pseudoscience, really a fabricated narrative to justify the centralization and monopolization of money, basically. So, you learn Keynesian economics at university, and that just tells you that government is God, and it controls the economy by pulling these levers, print money, withdraw money. It's a very antiquated industrial age metaphor. They even describe them as levers. And you're like, really? The economy is a machine? How could it possibly be a machine when an individual person is clearly a complex adaptive system, right? There's no lever you can pull to change my metabolic rate or whatever, where are these complex adaptive systems? When we're all connected in the world, 8.5 billion people, how could that not be a complex adaptive system? How would that reduce to some machine that you could just, press buttons and pull levers? So there's that whole Keynesian economic model, which is really just, I would describe it very uncharitably as a cover story. Eric Weinstein has this great quote that what does he say? The idealism of every age is the cover story for its greatest thefts. And so central banking, touts itself as the institution which saves economies and which controls price inflation and minimizes unemployment and all these wonderful, noble, moral goals. A lot of idealism, let's say, built into its narrative, when in fact it's quite the opposite. So, not to deviate from the point, but there's Keynesian economics, which is an untrue pseudoscience, and then there's Austrian economics, which is not in the mainstream curriculum because it's an economic science that doesn't serve the interest of the state, because it says quite the opposite, actually. The more free people are, the stronger the rules are between us by which we interact, the more peaceful and productive we become. And again, there's an intuitive element here, because, if you and I go to play basketball with one another, there's a certain shot that's a 2-point shot, right? And then outside the 3-point line, it's a 3-point shot, right? There's many other rules, but we'll just focus on the scoring. if at any point we're playing one-on-one, I just pull out a gun and say, hey, my shots all count 3 now, or 4 or 5, right? Is that still a game of basketball? Like, not really. I mean, we're not playing a game. We're not playing basketball anymore. It's degenerated into some kind of political struggle, right? That there's actual, coercive power dynamics taking place rather than the consensual game of basketball. Okay. So the same is true in economics. When you start twisting, everyone's supposed to honor life, liberty, and property, right? Do not harm, do not steal, do not kill. But when certain institutions start twisting those rules to their own advantage, the game degenerates, right? It's no longer a positive sum game of economics. It becomes a negative sum game of political struggle, basically. And so time preference is one of the core teachings of Austrian economics and is noticeably absent in all other schools of economics, including Keynesianism. And this basically says that so as humans act in the world, right, that I have goals and I have tools, roughly speaking. I'm always using my tools to pursue goals. Okay, so now these tools could be anything, right? Not just physical tools, but, my body, my knowledge, my time, my metabolic energy, all of these things, they're called means to ends, but I'm using tools and goals as like a decomplexifying terminology. So anything that you do involves the use of these means or tools, which are inherently scarce, meaning that you always want more of them than are available. And so time would be the most obvious here, right? Anyone that has not committed suicide would prefer to have more time than less, right? And so time preference basically says that since means are scarce, that everyone universally prefers the same level of satisfaction sooner rather than later, right? I'd rather have the apple today than the apple tomorrow. Why? Because tomorrow's uncertain. Tomorrow may never come, right? So it's a universal, it's the one objective aspect of valuation or preference that humans have, that we always prefer the same level of satisfaction, the same solution to our problem. We prefer to have that sooner rather than later, okay? So from that fact of time preference, we derive things like the interest rate. Now, I want to not get too far afield and try to answer your question, though. What is it that we can do about everyone? We've pulled on the thread. Society's coming apart. We see short-termism becoming more rampant, right? People don't even think they can afford to buy a house or have a family. So you get this YOLO mentality, right? Especially among the young. They're like, fuck it, I can't even, I can barely make ends meet paycheck to paycheck, much less plan to have a house or plan to have a family or plan to, save and invest and build a business. You can do anything that's further out on the time horizon, right? What's driving this? And I think the answer largely is the money printing, right? And it's also not just the money printing, but the taxation more broadly. But if we just focus on the money printing, the rate. So time preference being it's technically the rate at which you value the future to the present. But as the future becomes more uncertain, let's say as uncertainty rises, your time preference also rises. You're not able to plan for the future because it's increasingly uncertain. Okay, so a higher time preference would be a lower time horizon. It's a little bit counterintuitive because they say high time preference, bad, low time preference, good. But when you think about it in terms of uncertainty, right, as uncertainty comes down, time preference tends to also come down, which means you can plan more for the future. So what's happening here is when you print money, you are stealing the purchasing power from savers. So the money, as we said earlier, you're holding these dollars or whatever the currency is in savings as a means to address It's the widest set of options to address anything that the uncertain future presents you with. Okay, as the central bank prints money, it's stealing those options from you. It's stealing your ability to address the horizon of the future. It's compressing your time horizon. It's actually raising your time preference by injecting uncertainty into the marketplace by stealing your purchasing power through counterfeiting currency. Sorry if that's a mouthful, but like that's what's happening. It's like the material incentive landscape is being distorted in such a way that young people, they don't need to be conscious of this at all, right? This is all unconscious for 99.99% of humanity. Most people don't know what a time preference is, but they still have it. So it's this money printing that distorts people's material incentives and causes them to be more focused on the short term, right? Which then ends up in, oh, well, if this long term doesn't matter, well, then I'll just steal from you. Who cares? Right? I don't care about the reciprocity of our relationship over a long time horizon because I'm not concerned with the long term. I'm just concerned about now. So what's like the archetype of the ultimate high time preference behavior? It's a caveman, right? Caveman, big stick, sees other caveman, slightly smaller stick. He doesn't care about the ongoing reciprocity of the relationship, caveman A between caveman B. He just wants the food or the women or the whatever the guy's got. He's going to go bash him over the head and take his stuff. That's the ultimate high time. That's where this like caps out, is pure barbarism. And the opposite of that would be, oh, let's all cooperate under the principles of life, liberty, and property. And if we all agree not to harm, steal, or kill one another, we can actually become radically more productive. We can extend our time horizons. We can save and invest for the future. We can build giant multi-decade, multi-century enterprises. We can increase productivity. We can increase human flourishing. So that's the spectrum we're moving along. And I think it's all driven by really the integrity of private property.
I think you can see this stark contrast in these two different cultures that I'm going to describe. I was reading an article recently about the Quakers and how they were a big part of the Industrial Revolution. And there was a lot of trade going on between Europe and America. And a great deal of trust was involved in those trades.
Yes.
And in the Quaker religion, to lie is like you're going to hell.
Yeah.
Your word is everything to them. So Quakers were able to trade across continents without even contracts.
Yes.
And because they knew that they had such a strong bond to their word,
yes,
they were able to do business seamlessly.
Yes.
And it created some of the biggest businesses that are still here today. And then I'm thinking of like the contrast when you go to a country where they don't have those same values.
Yes.
And everybody's just pulling at the threads. You feel it. You go there and everybody's just completely down.
Yeah.
Living in these like huts with tarps on top.
Uh-huh.
And then you have some king and his family who's sold the country out for the resources. And in those situations, the king can't trust anybody except for his immediate family. So he'll put his incompetent brother in charge of the railroads, his cousins in charge of all the ships. They don't, you can't get the best man for the job.
Yeah.
You've got to just put in the few people that you think you can trust because all other values have completely eroded away. And so I'm just thinking of those two contrasting things. And like you're saying, we're skidding towards this situation where everybody's just got to get it now because tomorrow's so uncertain.
That's exactly right. What do you know what year the Quakers, what century or year?
Let me look this up.
I haven't studied them.
17th century.
Okay.
Christian. They were founded in the 17th century.
Okay.
I'm sure there's still a few Quakers out there.
Yeah. So we had largely, there was a bimetallic standard, so both gold and silver were used widely as money in those centuries, right? The 17th into the 19th. And eventually gold sort of won out in monetary competition to become the universal monetary standard. Now gold it's sound money, right? And so the reason gold wins as the universal monetary standard is because its supply increases the most slowly and most predictably. So again, if we describe money as like, what is this thing that I can hold, value or purchasing power in, such that I have the widest set of options to deal with whatever the uncertain future presents me with. The monetary asset that supply is most resistant to inflation will be that thing, right? It's the thing that has the least uncertainty or the most certainty in it, right? Okay, so the money printing that we just described that's causing people to be more short-term oriented, sound money is the opposite of that. So when you can hold your savings in gold or money that cannot be printed arbitrarily, you become more long-term oriented, which is to say you have a lower time preference. And this is because you can reliably go into the marketplace, solve problems for people, earn profits, store those profits in a money that cannot be compromised or debased, and you increase your wealth, right? You increase your purchasing power or value that you can then reinvest to go out and build things for the future. So you're actually capable of longer term orientation and planning as the money that you hold your savings in has a more predictable supply curve, basically. And so that's why gold became money. That's also the reason Bitcoin is the perfect money, which I don't want to preempt too much of that, but it's the same principle, right? But just taken to Bitcoin has removed all uncertainty from the money supply curve. There's zero uncertainty about how much Bitcoin will ever exist. And we can't say that for any asset or any money in the history of the human race. And so when sound money exists and is used widely, you get a movement away from that situation you described, where you have the central power, right? One guy, his family has all the wealth. He has expropriated and coerced everyone else out of their existence. So it's, very high concentration of wealth and very few hands. A lot of nepotism, right? He's just hiring his family and his cousins, regardless of their competence, to run all the critical businesses and infrastructure. And you get this very impoverished, violent, unpredictable, centralized society, right? And so sound money goes the other direction, right? When everyone can now engage with one another and hold their wealth in something that can't be easily compromised. And now look, gold's not perfect here because it is physical. It can still be seized. And I think the more you go into that, the more you see that the physicality of gold actually has been historically an incentive for human warfare, violence, crime, etc. But it is, to the extent you can safeguard it and secure it, which you can, right? That's what vaults are and safes and all of these things. You actually create the conditions in which you can get more of the decentralized wealth creation, which is more like the Quakers you described. Also the Protestant Reformation, that was founded on this idea, right? That you're doing work in your current life. It's all about delayed gratification. Like, what's the least I can consume? What's the most I can save? And this is worship in a way. You're honoring God through maximizing your savings and minimizing your consumption and serving the next generation. And that compounding effect across generations is actually what gives rise to capitalism. All right. The ethic of capitalism is born from the Protestant Reformation. There's lots of good books on that. But I would argue that there's a layer deeper, like the Protestant Reformation itself is born on the integrity of the sound money that it's using. Right? You need the material incentive landscape to work for individuals so that they can create this compounding effect across time. And 17th to 19th centuries, it sort of worked. But the problem with gold, as I just said, is that it's physical, which presents the problem of it can be extracted by force. And it also presents the problem that it's not very portable or transactable across space, right? If you're dealing with someone on the other side of the planet, it's hard to send the gold across the planet. You need the ships and you need the security and you need all this, and there's a lot of risk. It's much easier and more convenient to just centralize the custody of the gold and have the banks, that's what a bank is, and have the banks settle with one another on a ledger, to say, oh, you owe this guy that many ounces of gold, and they're just basically doing ledger entries back and forth. But the problem is now you're trusting the bank. You're trusting the custodian. It's a trust me bro situation, right? You've moved out of that world where settling physically in gold, you don't need to trust anyone, right? It's like, I paid you the gold. We're good. No one knows how to counterfeit the gold. So like you now have an asset that no one can, counterfeit, deauthorize, and is somewhat hard to steal, depending how you secure it. But once you get into this centralized model of, let me just use the paper that's redeemable for gold, I now need to trust the issuer of the paper not to defraud me. And even if the issuer of the paper, and all the bankers are saints and everyone does it perfectly, that's not enough, because then you also have to trust that the government and the state won't come in and seize the assets of the bank or give themselves cheap loans or whatever it is, which many, many, many governments and states have done across history. So there is this incentive trap that relates to gold that's very hard to escape. And fortunately, we have Bitcoin.
Yeah, so this arrives us neatly to Bitcoin. Your name is synonymous with Bitcoin. You're one of the, I don't know if
I'll
you
take
would
that
call
as a
yourself.
compliment.
Yeah. I mean, when I look you up, Bitcoin is the main thing that comes up.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, did you ever imagine yourself to be like this spokesman for Bitcoin?
No, not at all. I've told the story many times, so I'll give the compressed version here, but I had read The Creature from Jekyll Island 20 years ago, roughly. This is before Bitcoin existed. And so I had come to this realization that the corruption of money was like the main problem in the world. But at the time, I didn't think there was a solution. I was like, what's the solution? We all go back to a gold standard? I mean, that doesn't work for all the reasons I just mentioned. And so I didn't think there was a solution. I didn't think we were going to have a solution. And then Bitcoin came on the scene, and it took me a long time. I didn't realize Bitcoin was the solution to the centralization of gold and central banking problem. And it took me until about 2000. Well, I got my first and only tattoo in 2018, which is the Bitcoin logo under my right arm.
Okay, so now you're really committed.
And, at the time what am I, early, mid-30s, 33. So it's not like an impulsive decision. I don't have any other tattoos. But I came to see that Bitcoin is the solution to this meta problem, which is the corruption of money. And so I take that as a compliment, because I think Bitcoin is, obviously the biggest innovation in the history of the human race, perhaps, or at least on par with other tectonic innovations. So if you say that my name is synonymous with Bitcoin, I just feel very fortunate to have been part of this in any way that I can.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with crypto. I do have some. I've been in it for a while, but I don't have much. And I actually did a video trying to explain the basics of crypto. And I didn't like that video. It was actually one of the few videos I took down. It had a really good history lesson about currency, inflation, and the debasement of currency and what they did in Rome. That part was awesome. How they used to have these like pure gold coins, and then they would bite them, and then you end up with these like crappy little thin coins that are crudely mimicking what they used to have, used to hold value. But yeah, I took that video down because, God, there's just so many scams and so much volatility with the crypto. I just felt like uncomfortable even putting words out there around the topic and being connected to it. So I've been accused of doing softball interviews. And so I need to probably bring up some of the criticisms of Bitcoin and crypto and just get your response to them.
Well, can we, before the criticisms come up, we really need to disambiguate. Okay. Because a lot of people think they're the same thing. They think Bitcoin equals crypto and crypto equals Bitcoin. And, I don't know a good analogy here, but these things are basically, they're complete opposites. So crypto, the operative word is decentralized. There is no such thing as a crypto asset that is decentralized other than Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the only decentralized crypto asset there is and ever will be. And now, what does that mean? That means that nobody, no company, no group controls Bitcoin. That is not true. That statement cannot be said for any other crypto asset. So in Bitcoin, we say Bitcoin, not shitcoin. Shitcoin, every non-Bitcoin crypto asset is a shitcoin. And that's a very useful heuristic, kind of shortcut way of thinking about it. But the actual, unpacking of it is that this operative word of decentralization. Now, here's another analogy that might be useful. I don't know how old you are. How old are you?
37.
37. So you remember when the internet was becoming a thing, right? Like you probably remember the world pre-internet slightly. Because I was, 11, 12, 13, 14 as the internet's kind of starting to do its thing. And so I kind of remember the world pre-internet and then saw the rise of the internet. And now, internet has eaten the world, so to speak. You may remember a time when certain Fortune 1000 companies, right, some of the biggest companies in the world, as the internet was rising, there were a lot of companies that said, you know what, we don't need the internet. We're going to build our own private, permissioned intranet, right? Their own little private company internet that would have all the bells and whistles of the internet, but they would control it, right? It's a walled garden. They would permit people to come in and out. It's a little computer network that they control. Okay. Fast forward to 2026, and there's one internet and there's zero intranets. Why is that? Right? Why is that? And it's, as with most things in life, it can be traced down to economic incentives and economic principles for that matter. So as it turns out, there's a distinct economic advantage to an open network in which people can opt in or opt out at their own discretion, right? That's what the internet is. It's just an open set of rules or a set of open source protocols, to be more specific, HTTP, TCP/IP, SMTP. These are all protocols, or you could think of these as like languages that we've all agreed to speak in online so that we can deal with one another in a way that we don't need to ask permission. And so what's a more relatable open source protocol? The English language, right? We're doing it right now. No one controls it, right? I didn't invent it. I don't think you invented it, right? We just have these protocols, which are not only the definitions of words, but also the grammar, right? Also sort of just conversational standards, right? Like you pause and you let the other person speak. There's all these agreements built into the English language that is this open source software. It does change over time, but not unilaterally, right? There's no committee that says, hey, we're going to decommission this word and here's a new word, right? It just happens organically at the edges. That's open source software. That's what the internet is made of. And that's what Bitcoin is made of. So the intranets that these Fortune 1000 companies thought they would have instead of the internet is kind of like trying to create your own private English language. Okay, what's the problem with it? Is that you now have to spend resources on protecting your turf, right? Like, so the people that are permitted to use it and not permitted to use it, you have to expend resources enforcing that boundary, right? So there's a cost to keeping your network private, basically. And now you also so not only do you have to defend the turf or the boundary, but you also have to enforce the rules, because people aren't opting in and opting out, right? Like you've got participants inside of this walled garden, and you're telling them what the rules of English are, so to speak. So if they go out and misuse the language, then you need to impose some penalty on them. Whereas in the open source network, the opposite is the case. There is no turf to defend. There's no boundary. It's all opt in, opt out, right? You want to use the internet? Great. You don't want to use the internet? Okay, go do whatever you want. And so the internet, and there's no rules to impose because it's all opt in, opt out. So the whole internet becomes this kind of organic structure like the English language that outcompetes because it doesn't have to expend these resources on turf protection or rule enforcement. It is economically superior to the closed source private English or intranet model. Okay? Now going all the way back to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the internet of money or the English language of money. All of these shitcoins are the intranets of money or the private English language, which, what is that language that they tried to create? Esperanto? Was that what it was called?
I don't know.
You could look it up, but like there was actually an attempt to create a language and, control it in the way I'm describing it. I think it's called Esperanto, and it failed miserably for the same reasons. So, sorry for the long answer, but we must disambiguate Bitcoin, not shitcoin. These things could not be more antithetical. Shitcoins are much more like fiat currency, with the exception that they're not violently enforced, they're not violently imposed, but they are deceptively imposed. There's all this, I call it innovation theater. You can call it smoke and mirrors, where, Ethereum will say, hey, we're the next Bitcoin, or hey, we're the decentralized world computer, or we're this, we're that. It's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. It's all scams. It's all rug pulls. It's all pyramid schemes. And Bitcoin is the opposite to all of that, right? It's just crystal clear open source software. Nothing can be hidden. Opt in, opt out. Totally decentralized. And therefore the only crypto asset worth the name.
What if I told you that you could lower your tax bill and stack Bitcoin at the same time? Well, by mining Bitcoin with Blockware, you can. New guidelines from the Big Beautiful Bill allow American Bitcoin miners to write off 100% of their mining hardware investment in a single year. That's right, a 100% write-off. So if you had $100,000 of income or capital gains, you could write off that entire amount by investing it in Bitcoin mining hardware. Blockware's mining as a service allows you to start mining Bitcoin right now with minimal effort. Blockware handles everything from securing the miners to sourcing low-cost energy to configuring the mining pool. They do it all. You can stack Bitcoin at a discount every day and save big when tax season comes. So you can get started today by going to mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. Again, that's mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove.
That's well explained. Yeah, because in my mind, I had conflated Bitcoin. I've attached it to crypto.
Yes.
And, when you hear about all these scams and rug pulls, it makes you a little skeptical of all of crypto.
Yes.
Or including Bitcoin. My experience with these sketchy funds that you have to like exchange all these wallets and convert all these things. I don't know what I'm doing, but my cousin was like, you got to get in on this thing.
Yes.
These DAOs or whatever.
Yes.
And so he convinced me to put some money into this thing, and we watched it go up and up and up. And it literally counted your money in Lamborghinis. It said,
there's your red flag.
Yeah. Week 2, you've earned half a Lamborghini. Week 3, you've got a full Lamborghini or something like that. And then I was like, this is amazing. And then my cousin, 2 weeks later, he's like, dude, get your money out now. And I said, I can't, I'm not bad at computer right now. I'll do it when I get home.
Mm-hmm.
He says, no, you got to do it now. And like literally the next day it went down to 0.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, what happened? He's like, that's it. It's gone. Like,
yeah. And that's, so that's the core difference.
Yeah.
There's never been a rug pull in Bitcoin, and there never will be, because there's no one to pull the rug. There's no central party, right? Just like there's never going to be a rug pull in gold. There's no entity that can come out and be like, oh, we're going to what would they do? Well, you can't print the gold, right? The rug pull is when you print a bunch of the token and sell it on the market. You basically dump on the market to steal all the value. You can't do that with gold. You can't do that with Bitcoin. But all the shit coins exist exclusively for that purpose. No matter what they say, no matter what, smoke and mirrors they may present you with, take it from someone who's been around for 10 years. And you could also, don't take my word for it, actually. You could go and just consult with a Bitcoin maximalist cohort online they'll give you all the painful stories. You're not alone in your loss, your rug pulling. There have been probably tens of thousands at this point in the past 10 years.
Well, I guess that poses another problem for Bitcoin because it's too perfect. It's not inflationary, so people are not using it as a money. They're holding it because it's deflationary. They're like, why would I spend Bitcoin today when I can hold it till tomorrow and the Bitcoin will be worth more tomorrow and I can get more tomorrow. So I'm just going to hold it. And so I think another big criticism is the utility. People are just holding it as a security. They're not, is it going to bridge that gap, cross that chasm and start being used in everyday trades?
Yeah. So let me try to just answer it directly, and then I'll get to the second part of the question, which is more like the medium of exchange. So let's first of all think about what that means. Okay. So if you go into the marketplace, you provide goods to someone, right? Again, services are immaterial goods. So you do something for someone, you solve someone's problem. For most people, this is going to work, right? You go to your employer, you do some things, some activities, and then you get a paycheck. Okay, those activities there's a customer somewhere inside of your employer. That's what all businesses are, right? All businesses have customers to provide goods for. So you contributed to the production of goods or the solution of a customer's problem or problems, and you were paid in money for providing those goods, right? Now, if you just hold that money and don't do anything with it, right? You hold it as savings. What's the big picture impact of what you've done? You've gone into the marketplace, you've added it to the quantity of goods or the productive output, if you will, or the total amount of solutions available in the marketplace. You've increased that, right? You've increased the solutions available to the world. And you were paid in money, but you haven't spent the money. Okay? Now, when you spend the money, that's you going back into the marketplace and having someone solve problems for you, right? You need a new pair of shoes, you want a new car, whatever the thing is. But until you spend that money, you have solved problems for other people, but have not had problems solved for you in turn. Okay? So that's a really good thing. That's a great thing. That's deferred gratification, right? Back to the Protestant Reformation and capitalism. This is what it's built on, right? Go out and solve problems for other people and then defer your consumption or defer your own problem solving until later, right? This increases the aggregate quantity and quality of goods in the world, or the capital stock is another term economists use. So that's amazing, actually. When you go and you acquire Bitcoin and there's a big incentive to just hold it. Well, how did you acquire it? Okay, you traded dollars for it, probably. Okay, how did you get the dollars? Well, you went to work, probably, in the situation I just described. So you went and created more goods for the world, but you didn't consume goods in turn. So you added to the productive capacity of society, but you did not subtract from it. And then you used that to buy a savings technology called Bitcoin. That is the best vehicle for holding your purchasing power into the future. So saving is amazing. Saving is good for you. It's good for the world. It's one of these few acts that's both simultaneously selfish and selfless. Okay. And so for Bitcoin specifically, savings is the utility. This is the this is the core value proposition of Bitcoin. There are others, but savings is the thing, right? And this is why gold is also, why is it a $22 trillion market? Gold, not Bitcoin, because it's of its savings, its ability to save purchasing power or value into the future. This is what makes gold. This is why gold trades, the industrial use case of gold, which gold is used in computers and dentistry and all these things. That's like a $2 to $4 trillion market. but gold's market cap is like 20 to 24 trillion. That whole difference, that 90% of gold's market cap, is all demand for gold as money, for holding purchasing power into the future, for gold as savings in the language we're using here. So that's a big, big use case. That is the utility of gold by far, right? It's 10x more utility in savings than it is in computers or dentistry, okay? So Bitcoin is like the perfect savings technology because it has a perfectly fixed supply. No one can debase it, right? You can create more of anything, any good, you can create more of, including gold. You simply cannot create more Bitcoin. Therefore, relative to the supply of Bitcoin, as the stock of goods goes up in the world, the amount of goods you can acquire per unit of Bitcoin increases. So this is why the Bitcoin price always goes up. We call it number go up technology. And so, what's a simple way to say this? In a world where everyone wants to print money, and now with the advent of crypto, everyone can print money. You can go and launch the after school coin right now. It'll take you 15 minutes on the Ethereum blockchain. You can go sell this token to your whole fucking audience, and then you too can rug pull them. You can do that. Anyone can do that now, thanks to Ethereum and all the other shitcoin platforms, right? So in a world where everyone wants to print money, and now in a world where everyone can print money, thanks to crypto, the money that nobody can print will win. It is in everyone's best interest to hold the money that no one can print. This is why gold became money. This is why Bitcoin is the perfect money. So the savings is the utility. So that criticism, I think, is utterly invalid. And now the second part of your question, I'll just answer it quickly. Does Bitcoin ever become used as a medium of exchange? There's an economist named William Jevons, and he wrote about the ascendancy of gold as money. And he said originally it was used as a collectible. So people would use it as like ornamentation, jewelry, just collecting it. And then over time, because it has this inflexible supply, it grows in value, right? So the number of goods tradable for gold is going up, right? So the purchasing power of gold is going up. Eventually, it becomes a store of value, which is what we know gold as today, a savings technology. Once it stores enough value, it starts being used as a medium of exchange. So people start to transact in gold, right? So gold becomes more of what we widely consider money to be, like a universal medium of exchange. And then finally, when enough people are transacting in gold, then we start to denominate and think and negotiate in gold in terms of pricing. We price things in gold. So it becomes a unit of account. And so that sequence is the evolutionary history of gold. Collectible, store of value, medium of exchange, unit of account. My hypothesis is that Bitcoin will follow the same path. Right? Initially, it was a collectible. You could go online and click, literally there were Bitcoin faucets. You could go to a website and click a panel and it would give you 50 Bitcoin. Right? It's not even an asset at that point. It's just this like weird internet funny money. Then eventually, because Bitcoin is costly to produce and it has its rules, make it a very useful money, which we can get more into. It starts trading for quote unquote real money, right? People start exchanging dollars for Bitcoin. And now initially it was pegged at, approximately at its production cost, which was like, less than it was either less than a few cents or I think it was 0.6 of a cent when it was first traded. And that was just the energy that went into the production of the Bitcoin, basically. And now it's progressed, right? Bitcoin's no longer 0.6 of a cent or whatever it was. It's 60,000 plus US dollars per Bitcoin. So now it's progressed from collectible to store value. And over the past 17 years of Bitcoin's existence, it has been the best store of value in the history of the human race. It's not even a contest, right? Bitcoin is the best performing asset in the history of the human race by like a long, long, long shot. Okay, so it's now very effective as a store of value. It has already cleared trillions of dollars of transactions. So people do use it to trade and settle exchanges. So it is evolving from store value into medium of exchange. And then very few people, although some people, do denominate prices in Bitcoin, right? I think of my net worth in terms of Bitcoin. I often say if it doesn't make sats are the subunits of Bitcoin. If it doesn't make sats, then it doesn't make sense. So why would I go out and take risk investing my Bitcoin in a business enterprise? You take market risk, execution risk, et cetera, when if the Bitcoin is outperforming and I take basically no risk holding the Bitcoin, I'm just taking volatility risk, but you hold the asset in self-custody. I don't need to trust anyone. If that outperforms the prospective business investment, then it doesn't make sense for me to invest in it. And so you get this very high bar for what's called in finance value investing, that you only want to invest in deals that are expected to outperform, the risk-free rate, as they often term it in finance. But it's gone from, it used to be, the value of holding gold. It's become U.S. Treasuries. So, yeah, that's the path Bitcoin follows. And I think that it simplifies a lot of things. It's like, why? If you can just hold Bitcoin and get a certain level of return per unit of risk, why would you take on additional risk for less return? It doesn't make any sense. So therefore, you'll never invest in a deal unless it's expected to outperform Bitcoin. But again, that people might be like, oh, well, that's hoarding money and that's idle capital. That's just like, no, it's not. Go back to the first thing I said. You're increasing the quantity of goods by working and saving. You're not subtracting from it. So it's not a bad thing. It's actually it's what we want to do in economics. We want to increase the quantity of goods in the world. That's what saving is.
So right now we're looking at the complete obliteration of the US dollar, essentially because of the debt. The debt is spiraling out of control. And are you just sitting on the sidelines watching this debt and you're kind of like, oh, this is good. This is good for Bitcoin. The more money we print, the better Bitcoin looks every day. Is that kind of a good relationship to a good way of looking at it?
Well, that happens regardless of Bitcoin's existence. I guess we first need to understand what's happening here, right? People are like, how can the national debt be 37 trillion or whatever the number is now? And then you hear these Keynesian economists say completely asinine things like, oh, the debt doesn't matter because we owe it to ourselves. It's like, what? That is such a poor understanding of how economics actually works. There's no ourselves. There's individuals, right? Again, the Austrian economic or the praxeological viewpoint is that we are individual actors. We all act in accordance with, we use tools to pursue our goals individually. You can't say something about, ourselves. There's not like some big indivisible unit called ourselves that we borrow and lend from. It literally makes no sense. And so what's actually happening is that the U.S. government has, not inside of it, but let's say beside it, a non-governmental organization called the Federal Reserve. This is a central bank. It's a privately owned institution. It is legally authorized to counterfeit currency. So if you or I, counterfeit or fabricate a $100 bill, we go to jail for that, right? That is the exact same activity that the Federal Reserve engages in by the trillion, right? $6 trillion roughly printed in 2020. There is absolutely zero economic distinction between the Federal Reserve money printing or quantitative easing or any of these other euphemisms that it loves to decorate itself with. There's no economic distinction between those activities and counterfeiting. Yet you or I go to jail. The Federal Reserve does it to save the economy and to manage inflation. The irony of that too, right? The institution that's printing the money that's driving the price inflation says it's here to protect you from inflation and to dampen the business cycle and to make sure there's, full employment, all these other nonsense ideas. Okay, the central bank exists beside the U.S. government. The U.S. government so the Federal Reserve is issuing shitcoin called USD, okay? They have the sole privilege to print USD. US government has the sole privilege to print shitcoin called US Treasury, UST. Okay? The US government can print as many bonds as it wants to borrow USD from the Fed. Okay? So government issues shitcoin UST ad infinitum. Literally, there's no ceiling. There's no supply cap. It's a one node database. You can just increase the supply as much as you want. And they use that to borrow shitcoin from the Fed called USD, which can also be issued ad infinitum, no supply cap, one node on the database. There's no trust minimization at all. It's a total trust me, bro. Just trust me, 7 guys in the Fed, that you won't overissue the currency. And trust me, I don't know how many people inside the US government that actually have a political process behind the issuance of UST. That transaction happens, and before any of those dollars, so now the government has USD in their possession and the Fed has UST. The Fed is being paid interest on UST by the government, okay, in the dollars that they borrowed. So before any of those dollars go into circulation, you're already paying interest to the currency counterfeiting cartel that is the Fed. So the dollars themselves are born into existence at interest. This is the problem. Another good definition of money. Money is the final extinguisher of debt. That means when I owe you, I have a debt to you, I can give you money to satisfy the debt. Right? What is happening with this USD circle jerk is that you have a debt-based money, right? This is why I call it a currency rather than money, because it doesn't make sense to call it money. It's like, well, if it can't extinguish debt, it's born out of debt. You're paying interest to the Fed. Then it's not really money. And another way to think about this, you can never fully discharge the liability that's associated with a dollar. So if I take all the dollars out of my bank account, and I'm like, okay, great, I'm now out of the banking system. I've got all these dollars. I am safe. Let me go put them under my mattress or in a vault or wherever. And I'm out of the system and I'm good, right? And a lot of people do this. A lot of people think, oh, if I have physical cash, I'm safe. You can still have your purchasing power stolen from those physical dollars through currency counterfeiting. You can also have those notes deauthorized overnight, literally the press of a button. You could study the case of the 500 rupee banknote of the Central Bank of India. Many Indian civilians were saving physical 500 rupee banknotes, and literally overnight, one day, the central bank comes out and says, that's no longer money. That's no longer a currency that we accept. That's acceptable. And then poof, it's just gone. So like no matter how many 500 rupee banknotes you had in your vault or under your mattress, it's just gone. Literally poof. So how is that money? That's not money, right? This is the oxymoron of fiat currency, is that you can't have a debt-based final extinguisher of debt. That doesn't make sense. And so what is the practical reality of that is like you hold those dollars and you think, oh, I can use this to settle debts. But you always have the counterparty risk in the Fed that they're going to print money and can steal from you. So there's a liability built into the money.
I had never had anybody explain this to me in such simple terms. I never really understood, okay, bonds, Federal Reserve, central bank, what do all these things mean? I didn't realize. So like who owns the central bank?
Well, that's a great question. And it's actually not publicly available data.
Wow.
Now, the publicly available answer would be that the large private banks own the Federal Reserve, but you don't know who owns the large private banks. So when you trace it down to the ultimate beneficial ownership, which is the term they use in finance, is like who actually, after you go through all the layers of, intermediary businesses, who are the people that ultimately own this thing? It's untraceable. We don't know who owns the Fed. We don't know who these shareholders are. We do know the shareholders are paid a 6% annual dividend, though. So for the privilege of monopolizing and counterfeiting currency, which, by the way, and this is somewhat intuitive, it's a business that never loses money, obviously. There was a central banker in New Zealand that said it really well. He said that central banking is a great business to be in. We print money and people believe it. So for the privilege of being in that business that you print money and people believe, you get paid a 6% annual dividend, and the business is never unprofitable because you're literally in the money printing business. Like, how could it could never be unprofitable until it actually hyperinflates, and then the business is out of business, so to speak. So
well, the funny thing is, a bigger crime than counterfeiting money is destroying money. If you took $1,000 in cash and burned it on camera right now, you might have somebody show up at your house, because to insult money is to insult their entire little game they're doing.
Yes.
Or not money, but to insult their fiat currency.
The currency, yes. Yeah, because again, I mean, money holds great power, right? And so there's a symbolic power associated with it. Same reason, flag burning is often condemned. It compromises that projection of political authority. And so,
I really, really liked what you just said about money. A good definition is money is the extinguisher of debt.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, if I could give you a seashell and you'd say, oh, that cancels all your debts, then that seashell is by definition money.
That's right.
And so it's kind of changed the way I'm looking at just things. Like, if I buy a motorhome that has a lot of utility, is that money? If somebody says, hey, you owe me I remodeled your house, and I say, oh, would you take this motorhome as payment? I mean, that is an extinguisher of debt.
Yes.
It's not maybe the most efficient. And that's how they used to do it with bartering. But I don't know. I mean, it's kind of made me look at things I gather as assets, or put my money in savings as, in a different way, perhaps.
Yeah. So you're keying in on something that this is actually a very useful insight as well, I think. And it's, again, from the Austrian school, that every good, every asset has some degree of moneyness. And what that means is that when you hold an asset, if you hold it with the intention of consuming it or investing it, then that's demand for the good as a good, right? You're either going to, whatever, I've got some steak in the refrigerator, right? I'm going to eat it. So that's a consumption good. But if I have that same steak in the refrigerator and my intention is to go and trade it with people, or to go and pay off some of my old debts with it, then that's means the steak has some moneyness to it. Like, to the extent other people will accept it in the satisfaction of debts, there's a moneyness built into it. And so money itself is literally just the good that has the most moneyness. It's the thing that's accepted by the most people as an extinguisher of debts. But every good below it, right, has less liquidity, as you would say in finance, but it still has some moneyness, just a lower degree of moneyness. And at the very bottom of that would be very obscure things, right, that no one really wants. Like, maybe like a 1952 purple telescope, something that's just like so obscure. And it's like, well, there's just two guys on earth that want that and think in satisfaction of their debts. Whereas something like water or beef, is much more universally demanded.
Yeah, I have a friend who has an amazing trailer that he renovated. It's got solar panels. It's like he's ready for the zombie apocalypse, and he's got all these guns, and that's what he's put his money into. And I'm thinking, wow, if shit hits the fan, everything that you've put your money into is going to be worth infinitely more. It's going to be priceless.
Yes.
So,
yeah, in a dystopian reality, right? If we move into a world that has no internet, electricity, or AI, then, gold, bullets, food, community, anything that is any good that's much more associated with like survivalism, like these preppers, and which sounds like your friend is perhaps one of them. All of those goods explode in value, right? Because, well, you're just trying to survive. But I think that world, I assign that world a lower probability than our continued progression into the digital age where we do have electricity, internet, and AI. And I think in that world, I see Bitcoin as the dominant money. Not to say these other things don't have value, but you're in a world where there's much more cooperation and much more technological abundance. So you're less dependent on gold and guns and canned food for your day-to-day survival.
Yeah, I think another problem with Bitcoin though is it's presented as this open source thing that everybody can get involved in, but then when you really look at it, just a few players hold the vast majority. These whales, they hold the vast majority of Bitcoin, and it already seems like it's skewed towards just a few players hold all the power in this space. And if I'm just an ordinary person and I try to get in on it, I can get one little tiny fraction of one Bitcoin. It just doesn't feel like I have much of a say in the game compared to these guys that got in earlier, these whales.
Well, that's actually, I'm glad you said that, a say in the game, because that's the key difference. You are correct, first of all. There are, well, like the ownership of really any asset, there is a degree of wealth concentration. There's no asset in the world that's like perfectly equitably distributed. That doesn't exist. So there is that in Bitcoin as well. But the difference with Bitcoin is that even those whales have no say in the game, meaning that they cannot change the rules of the system. All right, as the example I gave you at the beginning of the conversation, if we're playing basketball and I pull out the gun and I say my shots count 5, yours count 2, that's me corrupting the rules of the game. All right, no one can do that in Bitcoin, not even a Satoshi. Right, if a Satoshi comes back, and Satoshi supposedly has around 1 million Bitcoin, right? So he has the largest stash of Bitcoin of anyone. He could not change the rules. He could not increase the supply. He could not make Bitcoin more corruptible. He couldn't do any. I mean, you can have, of course, there's the short-term price risk where if someone has a lot of Bitcoin, they can sell it all at once. They can dump it, right, and push the price down. But this does nothing to change the integrity of the rules that cohere the network. And that's the key difference. That is the key difference. Just like English, as we said earlier, just like the internet, there's no party, no individual that can unilaterally change the rules. And that's what makes the system fair and equitable for everyone. So although the wealth concentration does exist, as it exists with all assets, it cannot be exacerbated by manipulation of the rules. So, okay, you asked who owns the Fed earlier, and again, we don't know. But the rumors are there are about 30 families on Earth that are the ultimate beneficial owners of all the stock and all the central banks in the world, with the exception of, the non-Western central banks, let's call them, which are in countries like Iran. And I'll let you read between the lines on that one. Those 30 families are said to own over 50% of the world's wealth. That's right, 30 families. So call that, a few thousand people, if you wanted to be very generous, own over half of the world's total wealth, 8.5 billion people. Half of that wealth is in the hands of a few thousand. So that wealth concentration is exacerbated as more money is printed, as the rules are corrupted, as we continue to engage in this game of political struggle that contravenes the positive sum game of economics. So the integrity of the rules is what upholds peaceful gameplay. Another way of saying this, if I have the power to change the rules of a game, I have the power to win that game forever, in perpetuity. Right? If we're playing poker and you lay down a full house and I lay down 2 pair. Okay, well, a full house beats 2 pair. But if I can just change the rules, well, I'll say, you know what? This hand, my 2 pair beats your full house. And the next hand, when, it goes in reverse, I'll just switch the rule back and I'll win again. You'll never defeat me because I have the power to change the rules. The power to change the rules is the power to win forever. Another way, one of the great, was it Clausewitz, the German philosopher on warfare, he said, sovereign is he who decides the exception. So if I decide the exception to the rules, well, then I am the sovereign, right? I reign over you and everyone else that plays the game. So what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is an exception-proof money. There are no exceptions. No exceptions can be made. Therefore, no one is sovereign in Bitcoin. Therefore, everyone, since no one is sovereign over anyone else, everyone is sovereign in themselves. All right, it's the ultimate power to the people. It's the ultimate economic democracy. And so, that's it. It's a big innovation. It's like, hard to get, as you may have noticed, I'm grasping for so many different metaphors and analogies, but it's like, try describing the number 0 to someone in, the 4th century. Like how do you describe how big of a deal that is? It's like, it's just this little, it's just an idea. It's just a category for no categories, or a number for no numbers. How does that change the world? Yet 0 gave us calculus. Calculus is basically the mathematics of continuous motion, and calculus is the bedrock of every modern science without exception. And so without calculus, you don't have the Industrial Revolution. You don't have the Scientific Revolution. You don't have the Protestant Reformation. You don't have modernity without the number 0. So imagine talking about that to someone in the 4th century, and you're like, hey, look, it's going to change everything. Like, this agriculture shit is done, bro. We're going into the industrial age, and then we're going into the digital age. Like, it's going to blow your mind. And they'll be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. That's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with, like, the discovery of an absolute. It's just an idea, but it changes everything. It literally changes everything. It's 0% inflation money. We've never had anything like it.
One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is MindLab Pro. MindLab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take MindLab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world, my thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is radically improved. MindLab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. MindLab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from over 1,400 human trials conducted over the past 32 years. So if you're looking to enhance your brain power, MindLab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove.
Well, another massive obstacle I see for Bitcoin is just that these 30 families who control the whole world are not going to just sit idly by and be like, oh, this new thing's coming and it's just going to take us out.
That's right.
I mean, these people that are in power now are going to do everything in their power to stop this from chipping away at any of their power.
Yes.
And they have all the power now. They could shut off your internet. They could say, hey, look at this guy, Robert. He's preaching some stuff. Let's ruin his life. And now they have all your data. They have the AI surveillance. I mean, they could destroy your life. Any dissenter, any person that's stepping out of line. And there's plenty of ways that they could destroy Bitcoin in other ways that are far more nefarious, and I wouldn't put it past them.
Well, that's an interesting claim, actually. And I think that is the multi-trillion-dollar question: is how? How does anyone stop Bitcoin? Again, the study of the number 0 is useful because so 0 was discovered in India and it came to the West through the Arabs. So we call it the Hindu-Arabic numeral system, right? We all worldwide take 0-based mathematics for granted today. It's the universal language of numeracy. We all use it. There's no exception to it.
I can't even imagine numbers without zero.
You know,
Like,
Roman
I can't wrap my
numerals,
mind.
right?
Yeah.
There was no
Yeah,
zero.
but even still, I could imagine a primitive person having 3 rocks, and then you take away the 3 rocks and say, now what do you have? That
Well,
zero.
it's a complicated question though, because it's
Yeah.
like, okay, you have nothing, but like, do we need something to represent nothing? It's actually a very weird philosophical kind of conundrum. And then the Indian mathematician that discovered zero, his name's Brahmagupta. It's a very fascinating. So I have an essay on this if you want to read it sometime, the number zero in Bitcoin, because I do think that is the level of innovation we need to be thinking at. And it also speaks to the unstoppability of Bitcoin. So Brahmagupta, just a quick aside, he discovered this in meditation, apparently. So the experience of shunyata, or nothingness, that you can get to in meditation, no time, no space, no place, that was the category, or, that's the no time, no place, space he was trying to represent in mathematics with zero. Anyways, it's an interesting study. Discovered in India, comes through Arab channels, merchants largely, into the West. Why does it spread? Why does zero-based mathematics spread? Because when you perform calculation and negotiation using a zero-based numeral system, you can perform calculations that are less prone to error, they take up less page space, and you can do the calculation faster. So if you're a merchant, and one merchant's using Roman numerals and another one's using zero-based mathematics, the guy running the zero-based mathematics software is going to outcompete the guy running the Roman numerals. All right, again, it's just economics. I can do calculation faster, more correct, and in less space than you. Therefore, I can run circles around you, right? I'm running better software. It's like a business using the internet or AI competing with a business that isn't, okay? So zero spreads. When it gets to the West, it is opposed in every sense of the world, every sense of the word opposed. So there was like this Aristotelian metaphysics that upheld the view of the world that there was the atom, right? The indivisible subunit that made up everything. And there was nothing below the surface of the atom. So there was literally nothing. There was a finite boundary when you zoomed in. And likewise, when you zoomed out, there was a finite boundary, like a macrocosmic shell. And so this Aristotelian metaphysics, which underpinned the philosophy and religion of the church, the medieval church, basically said there is no infinity and there is no void. Okay, so when zero comes to the West, zero implies infinity, by the way, right? There's a thing called the Riemann sphere, and you basically, zero and infinity are reflections of one another. And so this thing comes to the West. Merchants are using it. It's a superior software package, but it contradicts the philosophy underpinning the prevailing power structure, which is the medieval church. Eventually, zero is outlawed, literally made illegal. And as Victor Hugo famously said, there's nothing more unstoppable. What is it? Nothing more unstoppable than an idea whose time has come. And so it didn't matter, right? It didn't matter who was in power. It didn't matter what degree of force they brought to bear. You can't stop something, especially an idea that is superior in its utility to other ideas, right? What's another way of saying you can't point a gun at a math problem. You can't point a gun at mathematics, right? You can't use the tools of coercion and force to suppress mathematics. Another sort of, this is a little bit tangential, but I think it's useful. The printing press, which many people popularly know, like led to the demise of the medieval church. So the medieval church had a monopoly on book production, but then when Gutenberg invented the printing press, the cost of books collapsed, right? Books went from being this luxury item to being something that was very affordable. And so with that affordability of books came the spread of literacy and the spread of numeracy, and eventually you get the Protestant Reformation, right? Luther nailing the 95 Theses on the door, and then that created the whole fork into from Catholicism into Protestantism and the Reformation and capitalism, like we said earlier, right? Okay. The medieval church also tried to stop the spread of the printing press. They tried to outlaw it. They tried to ban it. Once they realized, hey, this thing is an existential threat, let's put our foot on it. And now the printing press it's more than an idea, right? It's a physical thing, but it is really just kind of a simple machine. And so what happens when they try to do that? They try to suppress the printing press. The printing press starts being put to its most subversive use case, and that people start printing books on how to build printing presses. And the idea of the printing press spreads even faster because the church is trying to stop it. Okay. This is also called the Streisand effect.
It's like Will Smith trying to get people to not talk about his wife.
Exactly.
There you go. Now the whole world's talking about his wife.
Exactly. So the Streisand effect is Barbara Streisand, was a famous actress or whatever. She had like this. She has or had, I don't know, maybe she sold it. She had, let's say, a home in Malibu on the coast. Very beautiful home. And she was very particular about no one ever photographing it. Right? She really fought tooth and nail to have her privacy, and she didn't want people to see her home and all this stuff. It has become one of the most photographed homes on earth. This when you try to resist and squeeze and stop, especially information or useful ideas, or in this case, just photographs, right, from flowing, you can actually create the opposite effect. And so I think with Bitcoin, the interesting thing is yes, all of the existing power structures are arrayed against it. This is one of the most liberating ideas that has ever existed, or liberating technologies. It is an existential threat to central banking and all these entrenched power structures. But then the question of how becomes very acute. It's like, well, how do you stop this thing? And I think the equivalent question is how do you turn off electricity everywhere forever? Because it's not like you said, they can turn off the internet. They can coerce you, talking about me. They can do all these things. They can shut down electricity grids. They can shut down internet. They can coerce individuals that are speaking out about it, whatever. They can do all these things. But that doesn't do anything to harm the Bitcoin network, actually. If anything, this signals to network participants that, hey, our reliance on that centralized power grid wasn't such a good thing. So maybe we should figure out a way to produce electricity in a more of a decentralized way. Or, hey, my reliance on that centralized internet service provisioning wasn't such a good idea because they just shut off the internet. So why don't we look into more decentralized mesh network internet architecture, right? You start to create demand for, if you what is it? It's like a whack-a-mole thing, right? Like you whack one, hey, let me just whack centralized internet service provisioning. It's like, well, people still need to move information around. So you create demand for all these alternatives that circumvent the centralized solution. And so I think any overt power moves on the Bitcoin network will just cause an acceleration and a proliferation of circumventional, if that's a word, technologies that circumvent the threat of centralized force. So you could say that the state is really good. And here's some case study on this. You could check out BitTorrent, which was like a decentralized internet protocol in the 90s, I think. This is when people were streaming music with Napster and all of that. Napster was shut down, right? Napster was a centralized business that was providing this service, that was pirating music, and that was illegal. So the state comes in and shuts them down. Well, eventually there's an internet protocol, or a protocol that comes out called BitTorrent. And it's just this open source software. It's running everywhere and nowhere. It's chopping songs into little bits, and it's providing the same service that Napster did, but in a decentralized way. There's no company, there's no CEO, there's no HQ. It's just software running everywhere, and nobody could stop it. State couldn't stop it. Like, so fuck, it's just software, right? Like, where do I point the guns? It's just this idea floating around in cyberspace. Bitcoin's the same thing. It's like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And here's one last case study. I'll leave it at this. China has had a long, interesting relationship with Bitcoin. And I guess it's been 2.5 years now. They outlawed Bitcoin mining. You can check me on the time frame. Maybe it's only 2 years. And when China and Bitcoin mining is where the rubber meets the road for Bitcoin, right? This is where the computers that are mining Bitcoin, they're competing in the mathematical puzzle that resolves every 10 minutes and awards the miner new Bitcoin. They're spending energy, and they're expending energy through these application-specific integrated circuits. So these are ASIC miners. These are computers that do one thing, and they mine Bitcoin, basically. So this is the physical footprint of the Bitcoin mining network. And all of these devices are like roughly the size of a shoebox. They're plugged into electricity, and they're doing one thing. They're guessing solutions to the mining puzzle, right? So this is the physical and energetic footprint of the Bitcoin mining network. This is also what secures the network. China, the largest and most authoritarian and brutal regime in the history of the human race, right? The CCP. They have like 1.5 billion people under control, so to speak. Like it's a big ass statist kind of dystopian prison they've got going on over there. They outlaw Bitcoin mining. What happens? The Bitcoin hash rate, which is the measure of how much energy is going into the Bitcoin mining network, it declines in the short run. I think 30 to 40% maybe in the wake of this, of China making it illegal. But then all of a sudden the hash rate rebounds super strong. Like it rebounds back to where it was and goes right back to it's already growing very fast. So it comes down for a few months and then it just rips right back up past where it was. And everyone's like, what happened there? And so the answer is something like this. These mining units are, again, they're just the size of shoeboxes. So if China makes it illegal for you to plug in this device in China and mine Bitcoin, well, what do miners as rational economic actors do? They pack these things into shipping boxes and they ship them somewhere else and they plug them back in and they start mining again, right? So that's what happened, right? You make it illegal in one place, you swat the hand of power down. The Bitcoin network has this like amorphous sort of liquid architecture that all these things just get boxed up and shipped elsewhere and plugged back in. And so if the largest and most authoritarian and most technologically advanced regime in the history of the human race cannot stomp out the most physical footprint of Bitcoin, which is Bitcoin mining, then what government is going to do anything about Bitcoin? Like what? It's like the test has already been run. We've got the biggest, baddest, nastiest government over here, and they tried to stop it. And they failed miserably. So who's next?
That's a good point. I mean, so just getting practical, this doesn't have to be financial advice for anybody, but do you recommend, instead of saving, you get your paycheck, let's say you get $5,000 a month, your paycheck, instead of putting that in the bank, do you recommend just putting that straight into Bitcoin?
No. I don't like the word should very much. I try to use it as little as possible.
Me too.
But I will use it intentionally here. And I think that people should study the nature and history of money. And you could say study Bitcoin, which leads you into, okay, what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is money. Okay, what is money? And once you get there, you're in this nature and history of money question. But I say should because I don't think there's any downside to that effort. There's this good quote by Saylor, something like, you spend 60,000, I might be wrong on the number here. You spend 60,000 hours in your life working for money. You should spend at least 100 hours studying what it is. And that, I think, is really good financial advice. I'm not going to tell you what you should buy, what you shouldn't buy. You know what? You should build a worldview that you have conviction in, and then you should construct your portfolio accordingly. Right? Own things that make sense for you and that you understand. Otherwise, you're going to get shaken out. like, so I don't tell people buy Bitcoin, you should do this, you should do that. I just think you should study it.
It's a great point. You can't argue with that point. Nobody can argue in favor of ignorance.
Exactly. And yeah.
Yeah, I always thought of money. I have this is a little side, but I view money as energy.
Mm-hmm.
And emotion is energy in motion.
Yep.
So if you can create emotion,
Yeah.
that's where you can tap into money. And I see this all the time in commercials. They barely talk about their product.
Mm-hmm.
They try to get an emotional rise out of you.
Yeah.
And then right at the point where you're at peak emotion,
Mm-hmm.
they sell you.
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend who was a personal trainer who did this tactic brilliantly. He would say to his clients on the first day, I want you to bring a photo of you when you were at your fittest.
Mm-hmm.
They would bring a photo of them at 20 years old. They'd gained 100 pounds since then.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, all right, now I want you to pick up 100 pounds worth of weight and walk around. And he'd have them walk around until they broke down crying.
Mm.
And at that point, he would sign them up for like 6 months of training. And they'd pay whatever. They'd pay a crazy amount because he would get them to that point. I was like, that's very manipulative, but it's insightful to, you get somebody emotional, you can sell them on something.
That's a great point, man. It's an interesting question I've wrestled with in the past is like, where's the line between manipulation and persuasion? And, I don't know. It seems like he didn't deceive them. I don't know. I don't think he violated any ethical principles in doing that, but that's obviously very persuasive.
Well, Immanuel Kant he tried to strip all religion out of ethics and just get down to the core of what is ethics. And he found out that do not use people as a means to an end.
Yes.
People must be the end.
End in themselves. Yes.
So I just did a video about this with Mark Manson.
Yes.
And we use the example of if I get a burrito for my wife, that is ethical.
Yes.
If I get a burrito for my wife, so she'll sleep with me,
yes,
that's unethical because I'm using her as a means to another end.
Yes.
So I always think about that with the things I create, the content I create. I'm like, the audience is my end.
Yes.
I never want to use them as a means to an end.
Yes.
And I feel like that's a good rule to live by.
It's beautiful. And then, so you're back to like the importance of intentionality in creating the world, right? I do think it gets a little more complex when you try to examine your motivations, like, sure, part of you is probably getting your wife that burrito because you love her and, you want to take care of her, but maybe there's another part of you that's like, I'm really trying to get in her pants tonight too, And so it does get quite complicated. And then I agree, we should always treat people as ends in themselves, and that, well, people are always a mystery to us. If you try to instrumentalize them and control them, it's like, well, that's not going to work because people aren't pebbles, right? You don't pick them up and move them over here and move them over there. Like, we're these self-directed autopoietic processes, right? Like we're very unpredictable, basically, I guess would be the short answer. But we also need to be means to one another's ends. That's what capitalism is, right? It's like, okay, you have a goal of releasing a podcast. I'm your guest. I'm a means to the end of your goal. I'm a means to your goal of releasing a podcast. Now I'm doing it consensually, so therefore I think it's ethical. I don't feel like I'm being used or manipulated into this. Blink twice if you're scared, right? So consent. I think consent ends up being this like very critical line. And it's very critical in libertarian philosophy and the Austrian economic tradition that the very fact that you're doing something consensually, that we both agree to it, is a performative affirmation that we find the activity to be valuable. All right, I wouldn't do this. Because anything that I do, I'm not doing everything else, right? I've selected this path of action at the exclusion of all other pathways of action. So that, again, performatively affirms or proves that I find this activity to be the most valuable activity to do with my time and energy right now. Okay? So, because I agreed to it. But now if you put a gun to my head and say, hey, come on my podcast. And I'm like, oh, now you're putting me under, you're putting my physical integrity under duress. And you're saying, do this or else. Well, now all of a sudden, if I appear on your podcast, I'm not proving to you that I valued that above all else. I'm proving to you that I valued that above the loss of my life. And so I think that's the most important thing. And maybe, I don't know what Kant said about that. I will say that Mises considers himself Kantian. Mises is one of the godfathers of Austrian economics, where I shouldn't say I don't know. My thinking is very heavily influenced by Mises. Also Rothbard, Hoppe, others. But consent is this very key line. It is the line that really defines civilization, right? We're back to life, liberty, and property. It's like, okay, don't take someone's life against their consent. Don't harm someone against their consent. Don't take someone's stuff against their consent. Other than that, you can kind of do whatever you want. All right, so these are limiting principles that actually unlock a lot of human freedom. And the example, just a quick example I'll give you on that. We all agree, at least in the US, to drive on the right-hand side of the road. Now you might think, oh, well, that's a limiting thing though, all right? Now we've given up the option to drive on the left-hand side of the road. So now we're all less free. But by following that rule, we actually increase our freedom of movement a lot, right? Because if we all just drove on the left or right-hand side of the road, well, there'd be fucking pileups and car accidents and you couldn't get anywhere, right? The roads would be clogged. But if we all agree to the limiting principle, hey, let's all drive on the right-hand side of the road, well, then all of a sudden we have much more freedom of movement and much lower probability of car accidents. So limiting principles are not contradictory to freedom. They actually enable freedom. And that's what private property is. Private property. Do not kill. Do not harm. Do not steal. When you honor these limiting principles, you unlock human productivity. You optimize human productivity. And human productivity leads to higher standards of living, leads to human flourishing.
It's well said. Yeah, I remember you saying something about private property being like the core value that holds everything together. It's
yes.
like, I never really thought about how important private property is until you said that.
Yeah, that's why, private property is a bit abstract for people. They tend to think like, oh, is it real estate? So I try to go to those well, it's life, liberty, property, which means do not kill, do not harm, do not steal. If we just agree to those three things, that's like our equivalent to, hey, let's all drive on the right-hand side of the road. And so they're limiting principles, things we're agreeing not to do, options we're taking off the table. But in taking those options off the table, we're actually unlocking crazy wealth creation and all the options that come with that.
Yeah, it's wild because we're coming into this time where the message going into the future by Davos, the World Economic Forum, is you will own nothing and be happy.
That's insane.
Every business model is based on a subscription now where you're paying money, but you don't ever own the thing that you're buying. Like I have every song in my pocket, but I don't, Spotify could shut me down and I don't have a single song. I don't have a CD.
Yeah.
You don't really own the things that you think you own. We might be moving into a world where nobody owns their car and everybody's just stepping into Ubers all the time. And I don't know, I look at situations where people don't own the thing and they don't really have skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
You never get a nice garden. People don't take care of apartment buildings that they're just renting from. And it's sad because home ownership in America is becoming this dream. It feels like I've been trying to become a homeowner for a decade. It feels like I'm running on a treadmill and I'm trying to catch this helium balloon that's just flying farther away.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad because when you're renting, you're like, oh, why would I invest in the garden? It's not my house.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I fix this place up? It's not mine. You don't have any ownership of it. So you don't take pride in it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the word pride, but
no, it's, you would love the Austrian school. You're intuiting so many of the principles and ideas they've elaborated on extensively. So what?
I got to check this out.
Yeah, happy to recommend some books. So you most often hear the term private property rights, right? So as in, you have the right to enjoy the good, to enjoy the services the good gives you, right? Whatever the thing is, right? If it's the food and I own it, well, then I have the exclusive right to consume it and enjoy the satiety it gives me. And that right basically entails that I get to exclude everyone else and say, no, you can't eat my steak. It's my steak, right? So that's the right we're talking about, or the rights, as in the sense of entitlements that we're talking about when we discuss private property rights. But we often forget that rights and responsibilities are two sides of the same coin. If I just throw the steak out in the sun tomorrow and let it sit for 24 hours, well, that's irresponsible. It's not going to be edible, right? A more normal example would be your car. Okay, you have the right, if you own your car, you get to drive it whenever you want, right? My truck is sitting in my driveway right now. I don't just let anyone fucking drive it whenever they want. Like, only I get to drive it whenever I want. Everyone else is excluded unless I decide, hey, I want to rent it out, or I want to loan it to a friend. Like, that's my decision, right? I can consent to it. Those are my rights, my private property rights in my truck. But what are my responsibilities? Well, if I don't change the tires and, get the oil changed and take care of it, if I don't maintain it, if I don't do maintenance on the truck, then I will not be able to enjoy its use. I'll have rights to a hunk of scrap metal sitting in the driveway, right? So you have to be responsible for taking care of the goods in order to enjoy the goods. And so that's why these things go hand in hand. The private property right, which is exclusive ownership, which is saying, hey, everyone, this is mine, just like those things are yours. We're not going to steal. We're not going to hurt each other. We're not going to kill. Okay? We're going to pretend that everyone has the exclusive rights to their own goods. And then we can trade them consensually, right? Via contract. When we actually do that, we create the incentives for me to take care of the truck. Because if I didn't have the exclusive rights to it, and everyone could just use it whenever they want, then why would I have an incentive to maintain it? I'd have the village rental car. Why would I foot the bill if everyone's driving my car sits in the driveway 90% of the time or whatever, right? If people were just out driving it the other 90% of the time, and then I'm expected to pay all the maintenance on that doesn't make any sense. It's an asymmetry of rights and responsibilities. So you have to have these things married together.
Yeah, I think a different way of saying that is the more responsibility you adopt, the more authority you have. Because everything that you're responsible for, you have authority over.
Yes. And, the root word of authority is to author, right? So you have the ability to write your own story to the extent you have authority over yourself and the things of value that you own. And if the state takes the authority from you, right? They tax it, or they seize it, or they print money and steal your purchasing power. Well, then you're losing your ability to self-author your life is being diminished.
Yeah, I mean, you see it with people who take lots of handouts from the government, or they're on all these, just stimulus, whatever. Yeah, they're getting a benefit in the short term, but they don't really have any authority over what they can do. Or their livelihood is always in jeopardy.
They're dependent.
And, it reminds me of like what you hear parents say all the time to their kids.
Sure.
They're like, listen to me because I pay for your food, I pay for your shelter. And then the kid's like, no, I'm going to do things my way. And they're like, okay, well, if you want to pay for all your clothes and your health insurance and all, go ahead and do it. But until that day, you're under my roof, you're under my authority. It's kind of like this relationship. So, I mean, if you look at your life and you have no authority over your life, you need to look the other way and adopt responsibility.
That's correct. I think that's well said. Yeah, and responsibility is a fascinating word too. It's not just an obligation for caretaking. It is that, but another sense of the word is like the ability to respond. So again, if I don't take responsibility for doing the maintenance on my truck, well then when a riot breaks out and I need to leave Miami, I'm not going to have the ability to respond to that. because my truck doesn't work. All right. So again, that's kind of bleeds over into rights, but it just speaks again to how these things they're two sides of the same coin. That's why our semantics just end up talking about both. It's like you can't have one without the other. You can't have rights to something, to a thing you're not responsible for, right? And you can't be responsible for a thing that you don't have rights to. It's an isomorphic relationship between owner and asset. And it is the foundation of civilization itself. I mean, this is Mises. He goes, if history can teach us one thing, it is that civilization and private property are inexorably bound together. It's like the definition of civilization and the purpose of civilization is to have this exclusive ownership relationship with the do not harm, do not kill, do not steal, and then we increase our total economic abundance as a result. This is why we come together. This is why we can become more than the sum of our parts, acting in cooperation rather than in isolation. It's the human superpower.
Well said. I mean, man, I'm this has been a great conversation, and we've only hit one of the pillars.
Oh, geez.
We only hit the financial pillar.
Can I do a quick bathroom break, and then maybe we could just run through the last few pillars?
Sure. Yeah, of course.
I just need 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah. I mean, some of the other pillars, we don't have to hang on them too long, but you are a man of great physical stature, seemingly good health. I was looking this up. Only 1% of the population has a visible six-pack.
Oh, really?
So you're probably in the 1% of that 1%.
Well, recently, yes, but not always.
So, yeah, I mean, do you have any health advice for people?
Well, I'll just share a little bit of my journey over the past 10 years. So I just turned 40. When I was 30, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition called lichen planus. Fortunately, it's just, and still to this, I still have it, but it's just cosmetic in its symptoms mostly. I can have the occasional flare up where it's painful and it manifests as lesions on my tongue, so I can make eating and talking difficult. Fortunately, I don't have those very often. Traditional Western medicine, when you go in and they diagnose the autoimmune condition, they just told me a few things. Basically, they said, "Hey, we don't know what causes it. There is no cure for it. All you can do is manage the symptoms for the rest of your life." Which are steroid creams and things like that. And I was like, well, that's kind of an unacceptable answer. I reject that answer. So I'm going to go figure this out. As you do a little bit of research, you'll quickly zero in on more of the functional medicine perspective that all autoimmune conditions have to do with the gut. And as it turns out, I was also at this time dealing with some food intolerances, like gut inflammation, specifically with gluten and fried foods. They would irritate the gut. I would feel kind of physically inflamed, and I didn't know that was related to the autoimmune condition, but I learned through this study. And so I went on this long journey of okay, what can I do to correct my diet, to try and heal my gut, to try and mitigate the autoimmune. And dude, I tried everything. I did veganism at one point, which was early on. I was convinced by the California propaganda, I guess, that you needed to be a vegan to heal all these things. And I think I did it for 6 weeks, and I just felt like I was going to die. Basically, I was getting pale and weak, and the autoimmune was worse than ever. My gut was more inflamed than ever. It's just not for me. And so through a lot of trial and error, I eventually found the keto diet, which is very low carbohydrate, very high fat protein. And I eventually even tried the carnivore diet, which was just basically eating beef and salt for a long period of time. That helped me heal a lot of gut inflammation over the years. But then it's like an evolving, one of the things I've really learned about the health journey is that early on, I considered this thing it was a problem that needed to be solved. I have an autoimmune thing. I need to go fix that. Like there was some final, solution that I was seeking to it. But over the years, I've learned that it's much more about learning. It's like you learn to live with it and learn from it, right? Like your body's communicating to you, hey, I don't like these things. So you start to change your diet and change your lifestyle to eat things and do things that your body likes more. So you start to look at it more as like an ongoing process rather than some check the box, like I need to solve this problem. And so that's been useful. And the symptoms changed over the years, like I was able to solve some things and then other things would pop up. And the thing I was dealing with most recently was just carbohydrate intolerance. Like I'd lowered a lot of the inflammation. I was good. I had made a lot of progress, but for whatever reason, maybe through it could have been eating carnivore for too long. Because there was a long period that I ate just beef and salt. And then it seemed like I had difficulty digesting carbs. So the carbs would give me inflammation. So that was like the latest set of symptoms I was trying to deal with. And it reached the 10-year mark back again, I'm 40 now. So this is like when I was 39 and a half, July of last year. And I had tried peptides before. I'd done BPC 157, like at the recommended dose of 300 to 500 micrograms a day as a treatment for the inflammation and autoimmune, but it didn't really move the needle for me. And so when I got to this 10-year mark, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go for it. For the longest, I was trying to do the natural detox. And I thought, let me just do all the non-pharmaceutical ways. And although as I've gotten more into peptides, I don't really consider them to be pharmaceuticals so much. I mean, they're synthetic amino acids. So they're like signaling to the body to do different things. So they're synthetic in the sense that they're created in a lab, but they're also native, right? Native to the body, and that we do have these signaling systems, or at least versions of them in us already. And so I was like, I'm going to go really hard on the peptides and see because the research I was saying is like people have actually healed, and the diagnosis, which is like kind of not the diagnosis. I had all these tests done over the years, what's going on. And then you get to this point where they can't diagnose anything. So the diagnosis by default becomes leaky gut. So you have like impermeability in the cell lining in the intestines. And so food that you eat, gets into places it shouldn't get, and then it causes problems. One of the most touted solutions to leaky gut is this stack of peptides: BPC 157, TB 500, KPV, and GHKCU. And so I was working with some functional medicine guys, and I'm like, I'm just going to go for it. Also working with a guy that was helping me do a microbiome rehab at this time. I'd worked with multiple people over time. So between July and October last year, I can't fully distinguish, which solution was more contributory to my healing, because I was doing them at the same time. But in doing those peptides, BPC 157, TB 500, KPV, GHKCU, at relatively high dose, I was doing like a double the standard dose. Okay, I'm also a big guy. I'm 235 pounds, 6'4". So like I tend to have a high tolerance for things. Doing that simultaneously with the microbiome rehab with a functional medicine guy, I healed leaky gut in like 3 months. And now I eat normal again now. I can eat carbs, I can do all the things. And like, let me tell you, dude, it's very easy to take things for granted. Like there are so many years I'm like, I wish I could just eat a piece of fruit and not feel like shit, And now to be able to eat carbs again is just truly amazing. I have a lot of gratitude for it. And so, what is the lesson here? I think in this day and age, we have a lot of tools available to us. Obviously, all the research tools. And then we have a lot of the actual, biomolecular tools like peptides and these other things. Traditional mainstream Western medicine is not going to be your friend in any of those regards, right? Again, the autoimmune condition, they just tell me like, you're shit out of luck, basically. And then when I go into the functional medicine path, like, oh no, there are solutions to this. Maybe we can't heal it permanently, but man, you can get so much better. And so take back to the idea of responsibility, take responsibility. Don't just defer all of your decision-making on your health to some guy in a white coat, right? They don't have education or incentive for that matter to tell you about nutrition and alternative modalities. So hopefully that's helpful on the health thing. And then, yeah, like getting in shape. I also, I just turned 40, so I started taking testosterone. My free T was low. And so I started taking testosterone. And then I made this decision as well that I wanted to like get in the best shape of my life at 40. I basically trained naturally my whole life, which they say naturally is like not using peptides, not using testosterone, not using anabolics. And again, based on just the research that I did, I'm like, oh, well, people have used all these things for a long time at, different degrees. So I have this really strong foundation. I've been training for 30 years. I started Olympic lifting when I was 11. Here I am turning 40. So I've been lifting weights for almost 30 years, 3/4 of my life. And I'm like, I did a lot of research on everything. I was like, let me run this experiment and see what kind of shape I can really get in. I knew what kind of shape I could get into naturally, but I didn't know what I could get into if I was taking testosterone and anabolics and peptides. And so that's what I did. And at the age of 40, basically February, which is just over a month ago, I'm 6'4", I was 227 pounds, and I got down to 8.5% body fat. Now, that's not really a sustainable thing. Most people say you don't want to be less than 10% body fat consistently, right? You can train to get to that level, and then you should probably back off a little bit and let the body have kind of a more normal amount of body fat. And that's basically what I did. And, I did some photo shoots and all the things. So like there's this, here I am at peak physical condition. And then now my intention is to continue, and I open sourced everything that I did. Like, here's everything that I did. Here's all the data, spreadsheet of everything that I've taken on a daily basis for the past 7 months or 8 months. My intention now is to continue to do that. I'm cycling off of everything now. So I'm just going to continue to track what I take and the results. So I'm trying to open source the data for young men. And the idea behind it was when I got into fitness 20 years ago, I would have really loved someone that showed me the ropes, like what is all that, like, how do you get in shape? Because there's a lot of guys online that are just lying to you, right? They'll take a lot of anabolics and peptides to get in really good shape. And then they'll say, hey, sign up for my coaching program. Or, hey, I eat a lot of chicken and broccoli. Or, hey, buy my creatine. That's how you get in this kind of shape. And just knowing that that's bullshit, having been someone that's trained for 30 years, it just seemed like a ripe opportunity to be able to go in there and be like, no, let's just tell it how it is. Let's demystify this for young men. That would be valuable for them. And the fact that you can just do that, and that's like some kind of radical thing. Fortunately, there's a lot more guys, I think, doing this. They're just being honest about what they do. So I think there's a good trend there. I'll leave it at that for health.
So there's a very special place called the farm at Okefenokee. It's a 1,000-acre regenerative farm community about 45 minutes northwest of Jacksonville, Florida. The farm is a completely off-grid community. It has total food, water, and energy independence. Everything on the farm is 100% organic, and it even features wild boar and bear hunting. The farm at Okefenokee is right next to the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, where you can do camping and canoeing tours. So if you're like me and you're interested in the self-sovereign lifestyle, then you can get your own lot on the farm at Okefenokee if you tell them that I sent you. Once you get a lot, you can build one of 3 custom cabin options. So if you value freedom, self-sovereignty, and living in touch with nature, then join me and my family. We have lot number 21, And we're going to be building a cabin there starting December 2025. To learn more about the farm at Okefenokee, go to okefarm.com and make sure to tell them that I sent you.
I recently saw a video of you on the Miami beach.
Mm-hmm.
It went viral. This video, I think, I don't know how many, it had, I don't know how many views, but tons.
Millions.
And I went through like the comments
Mm-hmm.
and I just loved your honesty in that video. You were like, yeah, I'm taking testosterone. I'm 40 years old. I've trained this way for 30 years. And you can't get these results naturally. I think that was very refreshing to hear that level of honesty. And I saw that in all the comments. Everybody's like, thank God somebody's just coming forward and saying it, because we're so tired of these guys, even like professional level Olympia bodybuilders are very, very afraid to even mention steroids.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, it's so obvious. It's okay to say it now.
Yeah.
I mean, you have like Dwayne Johnson, The Rock.
Oh yeah.
Saying he's all natural. And I'm like, you're in your 50s.
Yeah.
And you put on 40 pounds of muscle. Like that's not going to happen naturally.
Yeah, exactly, man. I mean, I think this is the information age that's just changing people. Like my fitness photographer put it well. He's been in the game for a long time. He goes, those guys come from a world where if you had admitted to any steroid usage that you would lose all your contracts, right? It's like career suicide to admit to any of that. But that's pre-social media, pre-digital age. And the digital age is like, just tell the truth. Because if you don't tell the truth, I mean, you're going to get lit up in the comment section, basically, right? Like people see through the bullshit. And so, I don't know. It just seemed like, I felt like I was the right candidate to do this. I was like, well, I trained natural for a long time. Like, I know what my ceiling is. I'm not saying I have the best genetics or anything, but like, for me, this was a ceiling. And like, I posted pictures, like, here I am at my peak natural, and here I am unnatural. And so just to show people what it actually looks like. And then it is funny because you get so many guys, another thing guys were doing in the comments is like, no, I'm in way better shape than you. I don't even lift that much. I just like eat plants and go outside. Well, there's a metric called the fat-free mass index. So you can actually get, I got a DEXA scan, right? So it scans you head to toe. What's your lean mass? What's your skeletal mass? What's your fat mass? What's your fat percentage? You can calculate a thing called the fat-free mass index from that. And it tells you like, what is your per unit, fat-free mass index. So what is your lean mass per unit of body fat, basically? And you get this score between, I think it's like 15 and 25. Okay? Anything above 25 is like impossible, basically. Like to get a 25, you have to be top 1% genetics, top 1% athleticism, been training your whole life, eating right your whole life, proper, like best age, like peak physical age. So somewhere between like say 27 and 35, something like that. Like you need all these factors. You're basically a 1 in a million or more to get a 25 naturally, right? Without anabolics or peptides. At my peak photos, I was at 25.7. And so you have all these guys, like I'm literally just on the other side of what's possible naturally. But then you have thousands of guys like, oh no, I'm so much in better shape than you and I don't do anything but eat chicken and broccoli. I'm like, dude, the mathematics and biology just say you're full of shit. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. And so it's like an interesting like mirror to hold up to people when they're saying like, people just say stuff online basically. And so like, don't put so much value into it sometimes.
Well, another hilarious response that you see so commonly is just the comment that says steroids. Yeah. Oh, it's all steroids.
Yeah.
Jay Cutler looks the way he does because of steroids.
Yeah.
Or, these football players are this strong because of steroids. And it's like, okay, maybe steroids were a factor, but you can't just sit in the couch and take steroids and then become Saquon Barkley.
That's right. The other thing I found frustrating about that is like, it's just like saying supplements. It's such a broad category. I mean, there's steroids that children and women take, there's steroids that are more stereotypical, like make you have psychological issues and all that. So there's a whole giant spectrum. And the stuff that I took, I took Primobolan, Masteron, Anavar, Winstrol. Most of those are pretty mild some guys might say Winstrol is a little bit harsher. I took that towards the end. It like makes you more, cut looking. But I took those with testosterone. I took, low to moderate dosages relative to professional athletes. And so that's, in my opinion, at the more conservative end of the spectrum. There's things that way at the other end. There's one called trend that like makes guys crazy, apparently. Like you lose your mind, but you also get very big and very strong very fast. So
yeah, I mean, the concerning thing is that younger guys are doing this.
yeah.
I think because of social media, they got a very skewed sense of what is possible.
Yeah.
And there's the trend twins, these like teenage guys that have gone all in on trend. And they're, it does age you.
Sure.
I mean, it does. I mean, it can destroy your fertility for life. There's all these things. And you look at a teenage guy doing it and you're like,
yeah,
man, I'm definitely okay with like older guys doing that. I feel like at one point in my life, it's kind of like a parachute.
Yes.
At a certain point, you're going to pull that parachute out.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go my whole life without the parachute.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, again, I don't like the word should, to each their own, but if it's my son, I'm going to suggest he wait as long as possible. I'm like, try to get to 40, basically, all natural. And if you train serious until you're 40, you're going to have very strong bones. When I did my DEXA scan, my skeleton, the density of my skeleton is 2.5 standard deviations above the population. I'm like, I have a skeleton that's more dense than 99.98% of the human race because I've been lifting heavy weights for 30 years. Like I have forged a skeleton of steel. Not to say you can't do that with other stuff, but it's like building the strong bones, the strong connective tissue, learning the training, learning the mental game, learning the discipline, like do all of that to the max before you consider, enhancing your performance with anything. So I'm really glad I did that. Honestly, it just seems like, well, it's what I would want my son to do. Like just get to 40, son, and then you can decide what you want to do.
Until then, you're under my authority. Yeah. I mean, that's great health advice. The honesty is very much appreciated. So the other pillar is social.
Yeah.
Relationships. If I may say so, you have a very beautiful wife.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, any advice for young men out there looking for romance or looking to have that social pillar?
Well, I should, first of all, just admit that this is the one I feel like least qualified to comment on because I'm introverted by nature, and I think a lot of my weaknesses as a person probably show up in relationship. I don't know. We all have our blind spots and whatnot, and I like the social. I'm very, especially now that I've gotten older, like I can spend a lot of time in solitude and be very okay. Like I really like the work that I do. I can keep to myself a lot. I do like to spend time with the men that push me to excel. So like other guys that are high, but I don't need to see them often. I see them like once every 2 weeks or whatever. Look, marriage is work. Everything in life is work. And I know that sounds almost cliche as I say that, but if you get into Bitcoin, I think you'll also start to revere that term work. It's not a bad thing. Like anything of value requires work to produce. And so, when we met, fortunately, I was at a place in my life where it was just like, look, I'm just going to be in radical truth and just say, here's all the good, bad, and ugly about me. Whereas in past iterations of dating, I had tried to really emphasize the good and downplay the bad and ugly. And so I think that gave us a good foundation. But it's still like, as we've gotten deeper, more of our own childhood traumas, blind spots, etc., come up, and we have to work through it. And it's not easy. It's often, like the masculine and the feminine, man. I really think that the ancient Greeks had this term tonos, which is like the dynamic tension between opposites. And they considered this to be like the engine of all creation, that you needed this tension between opposites for anything new to be created. And man, it really feels like that with the masculine and the feminine. When we get along, it's spectacular and amazing. And, we're creating a child together. Like all of the things are amazing. But then in those times of disagreement, you just can't find a way sometimes to even get on, to just communicate. You can't get, it can be very difficult. And so what is the advice? I mean, I think radical truth is a great foundation, but then don't expect to ever be at some kind of like steady state final destination in your marriage or relationship. Like it's something you're going to have to continuously feed and work on all the time. A lot of books have been helpful for me. I think just trying to study feminine logic or psychology is very helpful. That I heard this saying that men love idealistically and women love opportunistically. And so we do, like, I think the man tends to be like, there's a deep instinct in men. It's like we want to protect and provide for the women and the children. Right? I think women's evolutionary path it's less idealistic than that. It's like they've had to survive more, frankly, in crazy conditions that men have created, right? Like we've been going to war and doing all this crazy shit for so long that women have to develop other tools for dealing with us. And so I don't know, there's this whole other, like, I'm just still learning it, but this whole other dimension to human psychology that, it's very oriented to feelings. And this is where I think this is a weak point of mine. I'm much more of a hyper intellectual type guy. When I'm in therapy and whatnot with doing my shadow work, they're like, your problem is you're not feeling your feelings. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, how do you feel your feelings? And so I'll intellectualize but it's hard for me sometimes to just feel my feelings. And then that is where the feminine operates. Like they're 100% feeling their feelings. And so, again, I don't feel like super qualified to give advice on this, but just, study, do the work, and don't expect some final destination or steady state in any relationship. It's always changing.
Well, that is great advice, because if you said you had the keys to figuring it all out, I would have been super skeptical and completely discounted you. I
definitely don't.
Yeah, I think the humility is very refreshing, and you're a very hyper masculine guy, so naturally you're going to attract a hyper feminine woman, because that's how the universe balances itself out. That's the curse of being a hyper masculine man, is you're going to get this extremely feminine woman. Even if she is masculine, she's going to turn feminine when she's around you.
It's man, I don't know. It's so endlessly confusing. And then Carl Jung has this interesting quote. He's like, in the most masculine man, you'll find a feminine soul, and the most feminine woman, you'll find a masculine soul. It's like it's just layers and layers and layers, where
the anima and the animus.
Yeah, like even when like we're in disagreement, like I can't just always be the structured, planning, fixed, firm masculine guy. Like there's times where I have to soften and be like, hey, sweetie, like I could tell something's going on, like open up to me. So it's just, I think when you frame it as like the engine of creation, then it becomes less about like men, women, and it's more about like, oh no, this is how like Mother Nature works. This is how reality works. And we are expressions of those principles. And so that makes it a little more, I don't know, enjoyable.
Oh, I mean, 100% to that Carl Jung anima thing, or animus thing. Where in every masculine man, there's like a little feminine girl. And I'm learning that now. I have a 16-month-old daughter, and I've always tried to be like masculine, provider, protector, whatever. But then with her, she'll put like glittery stickers on my face and stuff, and I think that's funny. That's like quite fun, actually. And I'm like, why do I find this to be so fun? And we'll goof off and giggle, and like that's been in me the whole time.
Yeah.
So
The daughters, yeah, man, they really, I think, well, I don't, the other thing I would say is just like having children is very difficult, but the most spiritually enriching thing I think anyone could do. And so, yeah, I was very afraid to have children before I had them. I have a 7-year-old daughter from a past girlfriend. And yeah, one of the best, just, it's the best. Like once I had her, I'm like, I want to have as many as I can. So
yeah,
that's what we're working on.
yeah. Oh, it's the best. Yeah. All right. I mean, that's great social relationship advice. Mental.
Yeah, mental. Well, I'm big on the book thing. I really think I try to do 40 pages a day, which is like roughly a book a week. I've been doing that for a long time. And read whatever you want, whatever interests you, Don't feel like you have to complete a book just because you started it. Don't feel afraid to jump around in the book. Like, don't feel like you have to go page 1 through, 300. Like, feel free to jump around. There's a great book actually called How to Read a Book. It talks about synoptic reading. And the book itself, I think, is pretty good, like as a philosophy book, but it also gives you these ways to approach a book, basically. Like you read the table of contents and the index first, and then you like figure out what you're trying to learn from the book, and then you can jump around. And so there's some good stuff there. Therapy, man, like we all have our things. We've all been through our stuff, but I think, and the world seems to be much more open to it now, but I remember when I was younger, especially like my parents, they looked at it as like taboo. It's like, no, I'm not if I go to therapy, that implies there's something wrong with my head. They used to call it the shrink. I don't know if you ever heard that term, or like someone that shrinks your head. It's like, oh, no, there's a million different types of therapy out there. And there's, I think I have received a lot of value from it. Just learning how you think, how you talk to yourself, how you talk to others. I think there's a lot of upside to be had there. So don't be shy about going to therapy. I mean, I know there's not mental necessarily, but exercise, we talked about it earlier, but like it's so good for your mental. It's so good for your mental. Right? Like before I do any podcast, I have to exercise. My brain can only operate at a certain frequency if I don't exercise. But if I go and I exercise and I get the blood flowing and all that, it's like my brain is at a higher RPM or something. And so, those things all dovetail together. And what else? Mental. I've been radically sober for some time now. And I think you should just pay attention to that in yourself. Like whatever the things you're into, if you're drinking or you're, using recreational drugs, just like know that you can reprogram yourself to make other things your vice. Like for me, it was like I would never describe myself as an alcoholic, but there was a period in time where like I would have a couple of glasses of wine a few nights a week, right? So 2 to 4 nights a week, I'd have 1 to 2 glasses of wine each night, and that, whatever I don't know where you draw the line, but you can take that same circuitry that likes wine or whatever the thing is, and you can reprogram yourself to like exercise instead. Typically it takes me, like when I quit drinking, for me, it feels like 3 weeks is the magic number. It's like you kind of want to have that glass of wine the first 3 weekends you're not drinking. And then after week 3, my body just forgets about it completely. And if I've been getting up and working out instead, that's the new thing I'm super into and look forward to. So just know that you're adaptive. You're not, just because you're into a thing right now doesn't mean you have to be there forever.
Yeah, that's a good point. Today is the last day of Lent. It is April 2nd today. And I gave up Instagram for
nice.
Lent. That is my vice. I convince myself that I'm doing it for work, but I tend to just go on there and doom scroll And I found myself almost looking forward to the times where I could just like hide off in the corner and just fry my brain.
Yeah.
And I was like, you got to give this up for Lent.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, in 3 weeks, I was really like, what am I going to do after my wife and daughter go to bed? I'm just going to like sit here and watch TV and just actually watch TV. What the hell? I need to scroll and watch TV. But yeah, after about 3 weeks, I kind of got over it a bit, and now it's the last day of Lent, and tomorrow I can re-download it again. And I'm like, am I really going to just download it again and go back to doing what I was doing?
Yeah.
I don't even know if I don't really want to do that. Yeah.
So you'll appreciate this because you're a deep thinker. I'm really into John Vervaeke. He's like this cognitive scientist and philosopher, but he has a good podcast. One of the things I learned on there recently was that because like in the real world, you would never see a sequence of things as disparate as like, dogs and then an airplane and then a cooking show and then some fitness content. Like you would never see these things in succession in the external world because there's like, you have to switch scenes, right? Go from the dog to inside the gym to the political debate to the airplane. Like there's all these different transitions that need to occur when it's external data. Only in your mind can you actually flip through those scenes that quickly, right? Like you could think about a dog, and then you can think about the gym, and you can think about in your imagination, you can go place to place to place very quickly. So apparently when you scroll and you're scrolling through these, the social media feed, and it's feeding you those things that are very disparate, politics, and then the dog, and then the gym, and then this, and then the guy's deep sea diving, like all these like crazy succession of things, your brain gets tricked into thinking it's internally generated content and therefore finds it more trustworthy and therefore like lets the guard down, so to speak, and you become more impressionable to these things. And so anyways, you could like dive into that more deeply, but the people that really research it like quit smartphones. They go back to dumb phones that just text and call. And so I'm interested in learning more about that because I do feel the addictive tendency to the scrolling as well. And it's gotten worse recently because I've been doing more social media work, So like you said, it's for work. It's like, oh, well, let me, I have an agency that manages my social media. So like we're constantly in there talking about stuff and going back and forth, and it's like hard to draw that line between, work in this case and an addictive tendency towards doom scrolling.
Yeah, I'll go in for work and then I'll be scrolling for 10 minutes and I was like, wait, what did I go on here for?
Exactly.
Oh yeah, work. And then I'll go back on and I'll scroll for another 5 minutes and like, oh yeah, that's the work.
Yeah, exactly.
It's gotten to a point where it's almost impossible to pay attention to one thing.
Yes.
So yeah, we got to like pull our attention back, like pulling the leash of a dog and train it.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Mental. That's good advice. And the last thing, time, we could cover this real quickly, but something I struggle with is delegation and managing time. I'm like a creative person where like for after school, I curate all the content, come up with the scripts, record them, do all the animation, drawing myself. Then I edit the video. Then I manage the YouTube. All the social media posts are by me.
Mm-hmm.
If you see a comment, it's actually me typing. Everything is by me. And I have not been good at delegating or offloading things from my plate.
Mm. Well, first of all, that's probably why the quality of your work is so high, right? That you're intimately involved in every facet of it.
Thanks.
I guess I've struggled with that too, to some extent, but then, you do, it's like a quality quantity trade-off. If you want to grow and scale, well, then of course you're going to delegate more things, but you don't want to delegate things at the expense of the quality. And so, that's a tough trade-off to navigate. Just to speak more to time directly, for me, I find that the earlier I get up, if I want to optimize my productivity, I'm up at 5 a.m. I'm at the gym by 6:30. I get up, do the electrolytes, coffee, peptides, gym by 6 or 6:30. Sauna, cold plunge, lift, cardio. Cardio could be a walk, Stairmaster, or a walk on the beach, something like that. Home by 9:30, 10 in the morning. All right, eat, shower, cleaned up, ready to work by 11 a.m. or 11:30. And then you just work until dinner time, 7:30. And then you go to bed, right? Like basically in bed by 9:30, asleep by, or really in bed by 8:30 or 9, asleep by 9:30, up at 5 or 5:30, right? That's like when I did that for several months at the end of last year. And dude, I don't know what the magic is about just doing it earlier in the day and having the exercise under your belt. I mean, I know the exercise like gets all the RPMs going in the brain and whatnot, but then also somehow earlier in the day, I'm more productive. So it feels like you have more time for me when I do that versus if I just sleep in until 7 or 8 in the morning. And then even sometimes I try to get up and work and then work out later in the day. I'm just slower mentally and slower. There's less hours in the day. And then I go and work out at night and like, I don't feel as motivated to work out. And so the whole thing just feels less productive and like there's less hours in the day. Is that true for everyone? I don't know. That's just what's true for me. And, but it's difficult, man. It is difficult to get on that pace and maintain it. But again, it's a 3-week thing. If you can do it for 3 weeks, just force yourself to do it for 3 weeks. It gets to the point where like I'm falling asleep at 9 or 9:30, like, wherever I'm at, I'm literally just going to fall asleep on the spot. So I better be in bed. And then I'm waking up ready to go at 5 or 5:30. And so when you can get into that rhythm, man, it's super cool.
Yeah, that's great advice. Mark Twain had a great quote: eat a frog first thing in the morning and the rest of the day is going to be easy. So, I figure you want to do your hardest thing first.
Yeah.
And I find that my willpower gradually goes down throughout the day.
Yeah.
So I'm not super strict with myself. I will allow myself to veg out, maybe eat dessert, watch some crap reality TV. But I've got to start the day with the workout, the discipline, the practices. Then I get into some very high level educational content. And then I allow myself to maybe listen to a podcast. Then I spill into some political nonsense. And then by the end of the day, I'm watching just utter garbage. But as long as I started on the good foot, it's okay to degenerate.
That's funny. Yeah, I think that's, well said, right? Early to bed, early to rise makes man healthy, wealthy, and wise.
Oh, yeah. Well, Robert Breedlove, I knew we were going to connect pretty well on this. I had a sense of it.
Yeah, this is really good, man. Your work's amazing, by the way. Like, I want to work together, honestly. I think what do you call it? Sketch form? Is it,
whiteboard animation?
Whiteboard animation. So that mode of content, I think, lends itself super well to the abstract money stuff because, what are you supposed to show? Like, you don't show the guys in suits. That doesn't convey any information to you. But when you do all of this animation, you can reify a lot of abstract concepts.
Thanks.
And so I'm interested to work with you on that.
Yeah, there's dozens of topics I wrote down that could be their own video. And it's funny, a lot of people thought that I was using a software program to make my videos or AI. And I recently made a video about AI slop. And for the first time, I showed myself from like a wide angle view, creating the whole video. And people were like, whoa, you actually draw that? I'm like, yeah, I draw it all physically on a whiteboard.
Wow, you draw
None of it's on a computer. I'm just recording myself.
Wow. So how long does that take?
About 2 weeks per video. Yeah, amazing. But it's fun. Like there's nothing I'd rather do than draw all day.
Well, dude, be grateful for that. That you have meaningful work. Man, it's such a blessing, honestly.
Thanks. Yeah, totally, man. Well, I bless you and your wife on this journey.
Thanks,
through
sir.
What you're going through, and I'm sure we'll cross paths in person at some point.
Yeah, I would like that. It's been awesome to talk to you.
You too, sir. All right, man. This has been a great podcast, and thank you, Robert Breedlove. Where can people find you?
So X is at Breedlove22, BREEDLOVE 22. Instagram, Breedlove_22, and then whatismoneypodcast.com.
What is Money? Great podcast. All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks, man.
We lock our doors, we encrypt our hard drives, and we use strong passwords. But most people leave one thing wide open: their phone line. SIM swap attacks are one of the fastest growing methods of digital theft. In minutes, a hacker can clone your accounts, reset your passwords, and drain your life. Unfortunately, this is not science fiction. It happens every single day. Optionality is the only mobile service protection designed exclusively to protect you from SIM swap attacks. Optionality offers military-grade encryption on their product and offers up to $5 million of SIM swap insurance. And to date, there have been exactly 0 SIM swaps on any of Optionality's over 50,000 protected accounts. So you don't need to live in fear, you just need to protect your weakest link. Go to Optionality.com/breedlove to secure your phone line today. Again, that's Optionality, EFANI.com/breedlove. For the past 25 years, I've been reading roughly one book per week. Almost entirely difficult nonfiction books, the kind that really shift your thinking. Books on physics, money, power, psychology, spirituality, and philosophy. The real stuff. But I get it. Most people don't have time to read 50 books per year. So I hand-selected my favorite nonfiction books and distilled each one of them into a course that you can take in 50 to 100 times faster than it would take you to read the entire book. Each course gives you the key insights, mental models, and frameworks that matter. We launched with 15 book courses, and we are building toward a library of 100 by the end of year 1. So if you are a seeker of truth, wisdom, and personal growth, then my book course is for you. To sign up, go to course.breedlove.io. Again, that's course.breedlove.io. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money. And be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.